Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. The village hidden in the leaves was generally a peaceful and all-around nice place. Well, unless you were one certain 6-year-old boy named Naruto Uzumaki. He was the town pariah and was generally hated by the villagers. But tonight, the 10th of October, those who hated Naruto seemed to go at him with a fury even a demon wouldn't admit to having on its worst day. At least at a simple child. Stop, one villager yelled. Kill the demon. Another one called out as they chased the poor orphan without relent. The young man was only 7 and he was having to run from grown men and even a few shinobi who throw shuriken and kunai at him. As he ran, he turned to look at the villagers' tears in his eyes as he tried to think of the reason why they hated him so much. Why did this? I've never hurt them. I never hurt anybody. And why do they call me a demon? He questioned to himself sadly. Unfortunately, the poor boy tripped on a can in the middle of the alley and fell to his face as the villagers now caught up with him. Why? Why do they all hate me? He questioned with tear-filled eyes as he backpedaled from the people. Look at him crying, like he's a human child. Stop acting, you filthy demon. One villager yelled, confusing the poor blonde boy. I say we kill it once and for all. Another villager stated, getting a loud reply of positive remarks as the ninja in the area were silent with their agreements. Naruto backed up to a wall and started to huddle into himself, still confused and afraid, as the villager and ninja now started to head towards the boy so they could kill the demon, as they put it, not seeing a strange thing above them. As the first ninja threw a kunai at the boy, it was caught in the grip of a figure in blue and black. He had a very oversized blue chunin vest that had armored on the shoulders and then plates under those with the mist symbol with a slash through each of them, like it was a combination of a mist and leaf chunin vest. Wrappings around his face. An old black forehead protector with a slashed mist symbol on it around his neck. Another forehead protector on his head with a strange wing-like symbol on it. A tattered short with old black ripped pants that were now shorts. And a pair of black shinobi sandals. The boy had spiky dark brown, nearly black hair and pale skin. His eyes were hidden behind a pair of dark sunglasses and what looked like black claws on his hands. Strapped to his back was a pair of swords. It was amazing that the boy could stand with them on, as they seemed ridiculously large on his small frame. What in the name of all things decent are you doing? The boy demanded as he seemed to glare at them through his dark glasses. The villagers blinked, then glared at the boy as the shinobi narrowed their eyes. Out of the way, kid. That thing doesn't deserve any sympathy. One villager made the mistake of saying, and only the primal and feral growl of the boy could be heard as his teeth gritted and he crouched slightly, then tossed the kunai at him, cutting his cheek. Just as this happened, the nin who threw the kunai lunged forward at the boy, started to twitch, glaring angrily at the ninja. The nin grabbed him as red chakra encircled the boy's right arm, and with a scream of an almost ungodly amount of pain, the man turned to dust in front of the wide-eyed and fearful villagers, the boy's arm outstretched and glowing with an angry red light. Run! The boy growled, and the shinobi seemed to back away, something about the sound of his voice making them think less lightly of the situation than they would normally. Or I'm going to kill you. He growled out with enough killing intent to force the breath out of the villagers and the ninja in the area. The villagers all ran without a second thought as soon as they were able to move again, the ninja only staying for a second before saying they'd get Naruto at some other time, when a psycho kid with an attitude wasn't with him. You okay, kid? The boy asked, looking at Naruto through his glasses, and the blonde blinked away his tears. Who are you? He asked, and the boy smirked, taking off his glasses, and Naruto blinked, tilting his head to the side as he saw the eyes of his savior. His right eye was yellow with a slit, his left red with a slit, both somewhat snake-like in appearance, and purple marks were lined over both of them and went halfway down his nose. Crow Kanji, at your service, he said with his smirk still present yet hidden. And you are? He asked, and Naruto looked down sadly. It doesn't matter. You'll hate me when you find out also. Naruto said sadly, and Crow frowned and sat down next to Naruto in the alley. Now that's not fair. I just saved you. The least you could do is give me a name, Oto. The older boy stated, and Naruto blinked while looking at him. Naruto Uzumaki, he said softly, and Crow smiled. See, that wasn't so hard now, was it? The boy asked, and Naruto shook his head no. Now then, why's everyone out to gut ya tonight, sunshine? Crow questioned of the younger boy curiously. Naruto just pulled his knees up to his chin and looked to the ground sadly. I don't know. They all just hate me. And it's even worse tonight every year. Naruto said sadly, and Crow sighed, leaning back against the wall. Why were you out tonight anyways? Naruto asked, and Crow closed his mismatched eyes. I have no home, no family, and no past. So I was just out and about when I saw you being chased and decided to step in. Crow stated softly, and Naruto blinked. Oh. The two went into silence for a short while before Naruto looked to Crow. Why don't you come live with me then? Naruto offered quickly, and Crow laughed bitterly. Sorry kid, doubt your parents would want a stranger like me in their home. He stated, and Naruto's face fell. I don't have a family either. He stated, and Crow's eyes shot open, and he looked at Naruto, then gave a soft smile. Then we'll be one another's family. Right, Oto? Crow asked, and Naruto smiled a true and electric smile as he lunged at Crow with a hug, shouting, yes yes yes. As he did, and Crow laughed lightly. Alright, calm down then. Let's have a look at your place so I can do some renovations. Crow said, anticipating that if Naruto lived alone and with how people treated him, that his home should be an absolute wreck. Rightio Ni-san, Naruto said brightly, and ran off ahead of Crow, who chuckled and put his sunglasses back on, having no problem seeing in the dark even with them on. He ran after Naruto with amazing speed for a boy his age while carrying his heavy-looking swords, and caught up with Naruto, who took him to an old and small rundown 3-story apartment building. Here's my place, he stated, and Crow blinked. You own the INTIRE building? Crow asked, amazed and confused at the same time. Yeah. But most of the rooms are nasty and the doors are mostly broken, so I don't usually leave my room unless I want to hide something important. Naruto stated, then took a thoughtful expression. Also, once when I first got the place, my room was burned, so I had to move into one of the other apartments. An old man Hokage decided to buy the place and give it to me as a gift. Naruto stated, and Crow nodded his head slowly while taking all that in. Well, come on Ni-san, I want you to see our room. Naruto exclaimed, and dragged the older boy into his home. The paint was peeling, the floors were rotting, the doors halfway looked like they might fall off their hinges, not to mention it looked like the electrical systems were all but non-existent and in disrepair. Oh shit, Crow muttered to himself with a grimace. This could take a while to fix. He muttered to himself as Naruto took off his sandals and walked in, Crow doing likewise as he pulled the swords off his back and put them next to the door, then putting his vest on the inside door handle only for the handle to fall off. Correction. One hell of a lot of work. He stated, and Naruto laughed. You're funny Ni-san. Yeah, it is really messed up, huh? Naruto questioned, and Crow nodded his head numbly while looking for something salvageable in the room. There was almost nothing that could be fixed, and as he wandered into the bathroom, he quickly closed the door, trying not to vomit from the smell alone, the sight of the room being enough to turn even his stomach. Oh yeah, this was gonna need a lot of work to make even slightly habitable. Oto, how the hell do you manage to live in all this filth? Crow questioned, and Naruto chuckled nervously. Actually, I mostly don't live here. Most of the time I'm out in the village, so I won't have to be here unless I'm sleeping. He stated, and Crow sighed and nodded. So tell me Ni-san, what village are you from and how did you become a ninja so soon? Naruto asked excitedly, and Crow blinked then chuckled nervously. I'm from Kirigakure no Sato, Oto, but the 2 headbands I'm wearing were given to me by my older sister and mother. My mother was from Hebungakure no Sato, or the village hidden in the heavens, which hails in the land of the whirlpool. My sister is obviously from Kiri, and that's also where I got the slashed mist headband and my 2 swords, Tora and Suzaku, or Tiger and Phoenix. So no, I'm not a ninja, even though my sister and mom taught me some basic ninja arts. Crow explained to Naruto factly. Hey, you could come to the ninja academy with me Ni-san, I'm sure you'd be a great ninja. Naruto said to his friend, and Crow chuckled nervously. I'll think about it Naruto. He told the young nin. Naruto started cheering, and Crow let out a sigh. What have I got myself into? He questioned as he looked as Naruto began to run around the apartment with a frenzied pace. Crow then noticed an odd-looking red seal on Naruto's stomach as he was jumping on the couch and narrowed his eyes. Naruto, come here. There's something on your stomach that looks familiar. He stated seriously, and Naruto obeyed him, walking to Crow with a raised brow, and Crow lifted his shirt off his stomach to see the strange red seal. Shiki Fusion? He questioned and then pulled off his glasses. He then made a hand seal with both hands, that had his middle fingers behind his pointer fingers, his thumbs on his pointer finger's knuckles, and his last two fingers laced together. Blood cross eye, he said, and his eyes change. His eyes still had a purple mark over them, but now they were totally gray beyond the pupil encasing his entire eye, with a black cross for the pupil and iris with 4 red orbs around it. First stage analysis, Crow said, and Naruto blinked. "Ni-san, what's with your eyes?" Naruto asked, confused. "It's called a blood limit, also called a Kekkei Genkai, or in my case a Dujutsu, jutsu of the eye." Crow explained, and Naruto nodded slowly. "My eyes in this state allow me to analyze anything I want, save energy levels or anything that's too bright to see, like light and lightning." Crow said as he studied the mark on Naruto's stomach, his eyes easily transferring the knowledge of the seal to his brain to detail what was known and then translate the symbols and the purpose of the seal in general. "Well, what's up with this, Ni-san?" Naruto questioned, and Crow frowned and took a thoughtful position. "The seal is definitely a Shiki fusion. Sensei said that it was a kinjutsu and was used to seal a demon inside of a human or an inanimate object by having the death god take one soul as a sacrifice to seal the demon." Crow thought to himself, then took a thoughtful look at the blood-red seal intently. It was originally created to seal the Biju so that humans could use their power as a weapon. Naruto's, however, seems like it has a few extra seals which are interfering with his chakra control. One that seems like some sort of repression seal, probably for his true intelligence, leaving some of his memories in the back of his mind and storing his knowledge for later use. This would lead me to believe that whoever made this seal didn't want Naruto to figure out who he was or what his position and or relation to him was. Crow mused to himself, knowing he was definitely correct, as it was the only logical explanation. "Now then, that and another seal, that seems to be sort of like my own chakra shell jutsu, which can be used to hide what he really looks like, even from people with chakra-aided eyes that can see through jutsu. However, judging by the way he looks and how old this seal is, I would have to say that the seal makes him look like the person who made the seal in the first place. Which leads me to the assumption that Naruto had an influential yet probably ruthless family, or perhaps some secret in his family, and whoever placed this on him did so he wouldn't be raised to be nothing but a weapon." Crow mused, then his left eye twitched slightly, growling as he studied the seal some more. The remaining seals seem to include a Kekkei Genkai suppression seal, which is rare, but not unheard of, and also limits who Naruto's real family could be to one of the Kekkei Genkai users in Konoha, which are the Yamanakas with their loose psyche, or having a loose personality that can easily be replaced after having it removed. They have even built an entire jutsu arsenal with this in mind, but usually that don't like having to grow a new personality, as it takes a few minutes to hours and is always annoying, as only their memories really replace their personalities, so if that is altered, so is their personality should they lose their psyche. Crow mused thoughtfully to himself. Next are the Inuzukas, theirs is called wild speak, the ability to speak to most species of canines. They have also made jutsu that deals with their animals. Then there's the Akamichi with their energy store bloodline, which allows their fat to store massive amount of energy into themselves to be used in their expansion jutsus. Then there's the Naras, whom have their living shadows, which is a strange bloodline that brings their shadow to life for combat. Then there's the Aburame clan with their bug contract, which is when you have those destruction bugs living under your skin and using you as a sort of living hive. Crow thought, then frowned. However, this is not likely one of their children, as from what little I know of those families, they're all very loyal to clan members and otherwise despise the idea of being a thing, not a person, so the person wouldn't have had to worry about that with them, so he's probably either a Hyuga or an Uchiha. The Hyuga have their Byakugan, or the evil white eye, as some call it. Its primary function allows a person to see through solid objects and over great distances, as well as see the tenketsu points in the human body. Then the Uchihas had the Sharingan, or the mirror wheel eye, as it was also known, and its abilities were that you could see things more sharply. It would seem the world was slowing down. You could copy almost any jutsu as long as you understand the basic structure of how the jutsu worked. It could reflect most genjutsu easily. And last, it was supposed to have a slight precognitive ability, but I've never actually seen it in action. And of course then there is that lesser known clan, the Kurama clan. Their Kekkei Genkai, I think, was called living illusions, and made any damage suffered in a genjutsu physically possible. Not to mention some of them are even able to make genjutsus real, they're so good. Crow mused to himself and nodded his head as he deduced what was going on. He'd figure out which clan he was from later, however, as he then moved on to the few remaining seals. Okay, then now that that's out of my systems, back to these other seals. There are at least 5 or 6 more seals. 3 for absorbing the demonic chakra. 2 for purifying the chakra and turning it into human chakra. One of these, however, seems to be moving at half capacity or lower, while the other is a backup for the first and officially useless unless he were to use too much chakra at once or were to damage his first purification seal. It seems that the first was slowed down by someone after the seal was put in place, and the second seal was stopped altogether so that the demon within wouldn't be devoured too quickly into Naruto, which to me seems to defeat the entire purpose of the seal altogether. But I guess someone might have been worried the demon might take over his body through the seal, or wanted to make sure that the demon wasn't completely devoured for some amount of time. And the last one seems like it's for distributing the absorbed and purified chakra throughout the body, although most of it seems like it's being stored by a 7th seal I didn't notice. Crow then frowned as he looked at the large swirl in the middle of the Kekkei fusion and let out a sigh. The last seal I didn't notice till my eyes scanned the whole damn thing seems to be a blood seal of some sort. More than likely it was made by the person who made the Kekkei fusion, so only someone of his own blood could take the seal off. It can be altered as I've seen, so maybe the blood seal's only meant as some sort of last resort. Probably meant to be a means of suicide, if someone tried to remove the biju that only the user or his family could remove and thus save Naruto's life. Crow finished in his head as Naruto seemed to be getting bored of standing around. Okay, Uto, it looks like someone, more than likely the Yondaime Hokage from the way you look, has placed numerous seals on you that seem to be blocking your normal brain functions, and keeping me and others from seeing your true self. This is also messing with your chakra control, and add to that it seems to be making it hard for you to maintain your attention on anything for too long. Crow stated, and Naruto tilted his head, making Crow sigh. In other words, Naruto, this thing on your stomach's making you an idiot and very hyper. He stated, and Naruto looked indignant. What? So this thing is making people think I'm an idiot? I demand you take it off me, Ni-san. I don't like being an idiot. Naruto shouted, and Crow chuckled to himself. He'll probably realize just how dumb that sounded when I remove some of those seals. Crow thought to himself with a smirk under the bandages on his face. Okay. Now Uto, I'm only going to remove a few of the seals, but not all of them. If I tried to remove all of them I might damage you, or at the least I might activate the seal that will kill you if I were to try and remove it. Crow stated, and then let out a breath and pulled out a brush and some ink out of his pocket. He then placed some seals on his hand and looked to Naruto with a look of caution and yet determination on his face as he pulled his hand back and held up Naruto's shirt with the other. Hold still, Naruto. This is only gonna hurt for a second. But damn will it hurt. He stated quickly, then slammed his palm into Naruto's seal. The screams from Naruto that followed this could be heard throughout all of Konoha. Once upon a time, there lived a fox spirit with 9 tails. And he was so powerful that whenever he shook those tails, landslides and tsunamis would result. The suffering people gathered the great shinobi clans to fight this menace. Finally, risking his life, one ninja was able to imprison its soul. Having defeated the demon, the brave shinobi died. That shinobi was the 4th Hokage, the Fire Shadow, champion of the village hidden in the leaves. In the village hidden in the leaves everything was normal and peaceful. Well, save for the defacement of their Hokage monument. Lord Hokage, one ninja shouted to the leader of their village. The elderly Hokage was currently sitting at his desk sighing both paperwork and his entire life away, it seemed, by the somewhat depressed look on his face. Yes? What is it? Some new outrage by Naruto, I presume? The aging Hokage questioned, and the ninja growled. That young devil is graffitiing the mountainside images of all the heroes of our village, your honored forebears. The ninja exclaimed, and the old Hokage sighed. And in paint no less. He added, and the Hokage pinched the bridge of his nose. Don't worry about it so much. Crow and Iruka should catch him soon enough. Assuming Crow isn't in on this one at least. The Hokage said, and got back to his accursed paperwork, looking slightly sad. Doesn't forcing an old man to sign this much paperwork count as elder abuse? He demanded in his mind, looking to the enormous pile on his desk. Meanwhile in the village, a young boy in a black shirt with orange pants, an orange jacket tied around his waist, green goggles, and a pair of blue shinobi sandals is running on rooftops grinning. His blonde spiky hair is waving in the wind and his eyes are scrunched shut as he often has them. "Catch me if you can, you idiots," Naruto calls out with a grin, the whisker marks on his cheeks still there. "Damn it Naruto, get back here," one of the three ninja chasing the young boys shouted, and Naruto grinned, paint cans in hand. He threw the paint cans at the ninja, knocking the two closest to him down as they got covered in paint. At the same time Naruto jumped down to the ground. The three ninja also got to the ground quickly and chased after him, passing a fence without a second thought. Just as soon as the three were far enough away, Naruto appeared from against the fence with a strange sheet that resembled the front of the fence. "Huh," Naruto said, pumping his fist. He then felt a hand on his shoulder and his blue eyes shot open. "Uh-oh," he said and looked up to see Iruka, his sensei, behind him. Hi Iruka sensei," Naruto said with a weak grin, and Iruka frowned. "Get back to class now Naruto." Iruka growled and transported them both to the classroom. The two appeared with Naruto tied up and the class snickered seeing him and Iruka appear. "Now Naruto," the scarred Chunin said slowly, his eye twitching as the bound boy pouted slightly, looking annoyed. "Tomorrow all your classmates will pass the final and graduate from the Ninja Academy, but the last two times this day came around, you flunked every course in the secret arts." Iruka shouted to the young boy who didn't really listen to him. "So you chose now for all your stupid tricks? You moron," Iruka questioned, then shouted Naruto, looking to the ground. "Sir, yes sir," Naruto mumbled, and Iruka growled. "Today in class we'll be reviewing the art of transformation," Iruka announced to the rest of the class, who screamed out about it being unfair. "All you have to do is conjure a form that looks like me," Iruka states, and the students begin after Iruka unties Naruto. The first student does the transformation, appearing to be Iruka after being in a plume of smoke. "Right, well done," Iruka praises, then glares at Naruto. Next up, Uzumaki. He states, and Naruto walks past some students who were mumbling about it being unfair or Naruto's fault. "Idiots. I'll show them all I'm not weak," Naruto thinks to himself with a frown. "Here goes nothing," Naruto says and puts his hands into the seal necessary. "Transform," Naruto shouts, disappearing in a plume of smoke. "Oh Iruka sensei," comes a soft feminine sultry voice from the smoke, as all that can be seen for a few seconds is a shadow. As the smoke disperses, Iruka and the others see a curvy teenage body with long blonde pigtailed hair. Smoke was covering her private parts yet left her totally naked before the class. The girl giggled and blinked at Iruka, who gaped before he was sent flying by a massive nosebleed. Laughing, Naruto returns to normal and doesn't see the death glares from the girls in the class or the minor nosebleeds of some of the boys, some of which have passed out. "I call that my Oiro no Jutsu," Naruto says, laughing at his sensei. "How big an idiot are you?" Iruka demands, getting up with some tissue now showed up his nose to stop the bleeding. "You waste all of your time and talent inventing these stupid tricks," Iruka shouted at Naruto, who simply looked away from him to the window. Later that day after school, Iruka was crouching down watching as Naruto cleaned up the entire Hokage monument with nothing but a bucket of soap and a cloth. "You don't leave here until every drop of paint is gone," Iruka stated with his arms crossed. "So? It's not like Crow's gonna jump me for being out late," Naruto grumbled, and Iruka sighed. It was true that Crow and Naruto were as close as any brothers that he knew of. But they were also the only thing close to a family that either was comfortable with. "Naruto," Iruka said softly yet loud enough for the blonde to hear him. "Now what?" Naruto grumbled. "Well, once you're through here," Iruka scratched his cheek and looked to the side. I'll buy you a bowl of ramen," Iruka stated and looked down to see Naruto looking up at him with a bright, happy expression. "Yeah, baby, talk about motivation," Naruto shouted loudly, and Iruka smiled at his student's loud nature. Later at Ichiraku, Naruto and Iruka sit next to one another to eat. Iruka has to pay for it all, as usual. "Naruto," Iruka says, and Naruto looks to his sensei, ramen noodles dangling from his mouth, his goggles sitting next to him. "Why of all places did you choose to deface that spot? I mean, you do know who Lord Hokage is, right?" Iruka asked curiously. "Of course," Naruto stated, nodding slightly. "To inherit the Hokage name, he'd have to have been the best shinobi in the village," Naruto said while still munching on ramen noodles. It was the Yondaime Hokage who saved our town by finding a way to beat the demon fox. Naruto said, yet his eye twitched when he said the last part and Iruka raised a brow. In all his years of knowing Naruto, he knew that Naruto only did that when he was either lying or really annoyed about something. Okay, then why? Iruka risked stowing the info about Naruto's actions for later. Because one of these days they'll be calling me Lord Hokage. Naruto said enthusiastically and then grinned at his sensei, pointing his chopsticks towards him. I'm going to surpass everyone who came before me, Naruto stated, and Iruka smiled. Hey Oto, so this is where you were. Came a calm voice and Naruto gulped as he and Iruka looked behind themselves to see one of the most sought-after boys in all of Konoha. Crow Kanji. Over the years Crow may not have gone to the ninja academy, but that didn't stop the young females of Konoha from falling head over heels for him. He was tall for his age, with dark brown nearly black hair that was in the same style as Naruto's classmate Sasuke Uchiha. He had on a pair of orange and black goggles that covered his eyes from view, and his Hebungakure Hite ate over his forehead, a skin-tight sleeveless black shirt that had a black face mask that would only cover his lower face and nose like Kakashi Hitaki, a blue armored vest that had a black yang symbol on the back with a silver trim that made an inward spiral, a pair of black shorts with a gray sash around his waist in place of a belt, a pair of black leather gloves that had black armor over his elbows with a blue trim, and black leather bands down his arms to the back of his palm, the gloves not covering his knuckles or fingers, the bands being held together with silver studs. His sandals were made exactly like his gloves, only with a metal plate over his heel, and they ended just below his knee, the sole also being somewhat thinner than a normal pair of sandals. Oh sorry Ni-san, but Iruka-sensei invited me to ramen and I just couldn't resist, Naruto stated, and Crow chuckled lightly. Okay Oto, I'll forgive you this time around, Crow said, and then sat down next to Naruto. But you're not completely off the hook, he stated, and slapped the back of Naruto's head lightly, the younger boy rolling his eyes. Yeah, Ni-san, he grumbled, and Crow chuckled, the only indication of any emotion. So how did it go with fixing up the old place today? Naruto questioned, referring to their hotel. Crow promptly groaned and his head slammed on the table before him, Iruka chuckling lightly as the highly intelligent boy wallowed in self-pity for a few moments. Please, don't even bring up that death trap you dare call a home, Crow stated, his eyes holding only a sense of pain and regret. I think that there's animals living on the second floor. And the first floor I know has rats and all manner of vile insects living in it. It's just a good thing we always use the fire escape to get to the third floor, or I swear we'd be attacked and slashed or mauled by rabid animals, Crow stated, and both Iruka and Naruto shivered. Bet you wouldn't mind being attacked by your fangirls, Ni-san, Naruto said with an evil smirk, and Crow shivered, then looked at Naruto. Someday Naruto, you too will know the horrors brought upon all of us whom have fan clubs. And on that day Naruto, when you beg, when you plead, and when you need my help escaping from them. And then Naruto, I will laugh at you mercilessly, Crow said darkly to Naruto. Naruto and Iruka both leaned away from Crow, not liking his tone. Anyways, I'll be heading home now. See you there Naruto, Crow said, getting up and walking away from the two sitting at the counter. The next morning was mostly clear and sunny with a few clouds wafting in the breeze. Naruto, however, was stuck within the bane of most children's existence, school. But the ninja academy should be more fun than normal school. However, this wasn't exactly true, as it seemed that even here teachers' only goal seemed to be to make life even harder on their students. Naruto was currently slumped on his desk in the seat in front of a certain brooding duck-haired kid with black eyes. For your final exam, you must each generate a clone. Wait here until your name is called, and then come next door, Iruka said while looking at his clipboard. Clone jutsu, huh? Great. The only one I can't do thanks to my lousy chakra control. Man, Crow was right, I really need to train my chakra control more. Or just find out if there's a more durable version of the Bunshin jutsu. Naruto mused to himself, arms folded under his head as he rested on them, trying to appear miserable and succeeding. After many of the students went before his name was called, then Naruto sighed, got up and walked to the next door room to take his test. Iruka and his assistant Mizuki both sat behind a large desk which had multiple headbands with forehead protectors on it. Mizuki was of average height with silver shoulder-length hair, and an average chunin to junin type outfit minus a forehead protector. Alright Naruto. You have to successfully create 3 clones. Begin. Iruka stated and Naruto made a hand seal. This is my worst technique. But here goes nothing. Naruto thought to himself, holding back as much chakra as he could. He, Iruka, and Mizuki all looked to the side to see the smoke slightly dissipate and reveal one seriously messed up clone that seemed like it was dying. Naruto and Iruka both looked at it for a second before it vanished in a plume of smoke, and Naruto then turned to look at Iruka. Here we go again. Naruto mused and inwardly braced himself. You fail. Iruka shouted, sending Naruto flying back from the force of his shout. Master Iruka. Mizuki said, looking to Iruka, who looked to his side. This is his 3rd time, and he did manage to basically conjure up a clone, even if it is a little messed up. Mizuki mused and Iruka frowned. I'm not that great at clone jutsu myself. So what if we just give him a break and… Mizuki started, and Naruto looked at him funny, his eyes glaring at the silver-haired man as he didn't trust someone so nice. The answer is no, Mizuki. Every student is supposed to generate 3 clones. Iruka stated and then looked at Naruto. Naruto. You only made 1, and did it poorly. Iruka said, thinking Naruto's glare was aimed at him and not noticing that it was solely aimed at Mizuki. With all due respect, your performance doesn't merit a passing grade. Iruka stated, feeling slightly bad and inwardly promising to buy Naruto some ramen later to cheer him up. As kids all met with their families, Naruto finds himself sitting on an old swing looking to the ground, lost in thought. Crow once told me that a person whose record is polished perfectly white is often more suspicious than one that's all black. I wonder what Mizuki's up to. Naruto inwardly resisted, then questioned in his mind, barely listening to the chatter from families congratulating their children. He instead put his goggles on and then vanished into the shadows. Iruka, could I have a word with you? The Sandaime Hokage questioned, seeing Naruto vanish. Of course, Iruka said softly. Mizuki found Naruto, who was heading towards his and Crow's home. Naruto, Mizuki said, and the blonde boy turned to his head to see him. Master Mizuki? Naruto asked, confused to see him but figuring that he was going to try to pull a fast one on him. The silver-haired man walked towards him and then put a hand on his shoulder. Master Iruka is a really serious guy. So that's his game, huh? Make himself seem really nice so he can trick me into doing something extremely stupid. Too bad for you, Mizuki. I'm not the one being tricked. Naruto thought to himself, inwardly smirking but nodding to Mizuki outwardly. His parents died when he was young, so everything he's accomplished he did by himself, with a lot of hard work and discipline. Mizuki explained, and Naruto nodded his head. So, what's that got to do with me? Naruto questioned, keeping to his dobi mask. You remind him of himself. Mizuki said, surprising Naruto, whose eyes widened. He thinks he's helping you to grow strong. Mizuki told him, and Naruto inwardly agreed that he was. Try to give the guy a break. Can't you understand where he's coming from? Mizuki questioned as Naruto looked to the ground. One orphan to another. More than you. Or he knows. Naruto thought to himself sadly as he remembered all the times Iruka has been there to help him. But, I really wanted to graduate. Naruto said truthfully as he looked to the side, wondering what Mizuki would do. No. Mizuki looked to the boy and smirked when he heard Naruto's soft tone. Then, I guess there's no choice. Mizuki said, and Naruto looked to him, ready to find out what it is that Mizuki was trying to get from him. Let me tell you a secret that I've been keeping for a long time. Mizuki said, and Naruto inwardly smirked, knowing that Mizuki was about to give away his secret plot to get him into trouble and no doubt killed. So that's his game. Get me to steal the scroll of seals and have the ninja of the village kill me while he escapes with it. Naruto mused to himself with a frown as he landed in a clearing outside of Konoha. It was in the forest with an old cottage nearby with a wire that led to the village. Okay, seeing as Mizuki's not here, I can check through this without interruption for a while. Naruto mused, looking through the scroll, and found a clone jutsu as the first one. Shadow clones, huh? He questioned, and a figure landed behind him. So Mizuki's is up to no good after all, huh? The figure questioned, and Naruto chuckled lightly and nodded his head. Yeah, you were right after all, Crow. He said as his brother went and sat next to him. What do you make of these? He questioned, and Crow looked over the scroll. All of them are dangerous for low-level ninja to use. You'd have no problem with the first few. The others require an unreal amount of chakra control however. Crow explained and Naruto frowned. Learn Kage Bunshin. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Kage Shuriken no Jutsu. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and Bunshin Bakuha. Crow stated and Naruto nodded his head. So in other words, write those down and leave the rest for another day. Oto. Crow stated and Naruto smirked. Right, he stated and got out a notepad and started to write down the jutsu's names, the hand seals necessary, and their descriptions. Learn Kage Bunshin for now and give me that. Can't have anyone else finding out that you took the time to copy some of these jutsu now, can we? Crow questioned and Naruto nodded his head. Alright then, I'll be back later. Naruto, I need to get this back home to the usual hiding place. Crow stated, then jumped up and vanished into the night. Naruto smirked and got to work on the jutsu, keeping his focus solely on the task at hand. That was why half a day later, and when Naruto had finished both the Kage Bunshin and Taju Kage Bunshin jutsus, he was utterly tired. Damn, Crow was right, those are high-level ninjutsu. He thought to himself as he kneeled down panting, now closer to the cottage than he had been earlier. Gotcha, Iruka said, appearing before Naruto with a smirk, and the orange-clad boy blinked seeing him before grinning widely. Back to the Dobi state for now, he thought to himself, and then pointed to Iruka with both hands. About time, nosebleed, he shouted, then grinned even wider. I found you, he shouted, inwardly grinning as he got a rise out of Iruka. No, you fool. I found you. Iruka screamed at Naruto, then breathed outward and saw Naruto rub the back of his neck. Hey, I guess you have got me. Too bad you were so fast. I've only memorized one technique. Naruto said, lying without Iruka noticing and rubbing the back of his neck. Iruka blinked and raised a brow looking at the orange-clad boy. He had dirt all over himself and was panting heavily. Seeing the way the sunny-haired boy looked and curiosity getting the better of him, Iruka just had to ask. You look exhausted. What have you been doing? Iruka questioned of Naruto, who smiled widely. Wait till I show you. I never dreamed. Some of the shinobi arts are so amazing. Naruto said loudly and inwardly cringed. It's really no wonder only Crow and my other friends actually know what I'm really like, with this acting job of mine. He thought to himself but continued on with what he was saying to Iruka. If I show I've mastered these techniques, you'll have to let me graduate. Naruto stated, and Iruka's eyes widened as something clicked in his mind. So, you came here to practice your jutsu? Working yourself to exhaustion, Iruka thought to himself as he looked at the boy who was preparing to use a jutsu. Naruto, Iruka said, and the boy blinked and looked to his teacher. Yeah? He questioned, and Iruka looked to the large scroll strapped to the boy's back. What's up with that scroll you're carrying? He asked the blonde, who looked to his back and inwardly patted himself on the back for being such a good actor. What? This? Naruto questioned, and Iruka nodded quickly, hoping his hunch was correct. Master Mizuki told me about it. And about this place so I could practice. Naruto stated, grinning happily, and Iruka's eyes widened. He said, if I could show you I'd learned the techniques in this scroll, and then you'd have to let me become a shinobi. Naruto shouted to Iruka, who now looked distantly to Naruto. Mizuki, he thought to himself, feeling betrayed. He then saw a flash from the side and quickly knocked Naruto away and was hit by several kunai and skidded to a stop, his back to the old cottage. Mizuki was in a nearby tree, two very large kunai strapped to his back. I'm impressed that you figured out where to go, Mizuki said to Iruka with a smirk on his face. Now I understand, Iruka growled, glaring at Mizuki heatedly and holding his side, multiple kunai sticking into his body. Naruto put up a confused look as he then looked between Iruka and Mizuki confusedly. The scroll, Naruto. Give it to me, Mizuki ordered of Naruto, who continued to look between him and Iruka frantically. Dude, I mean, come on, he shouted, still acting like an idiot to throw Mizuki off his true intentions and to underestimate his skill. That's right, pretty boy, underestimate me all you like. 'Cause as long as you do, I will have the last laugh. He thought to himself, inwardly smirking. Hey, what is this? Naruto demanded of the two teachers. Don't let him have it, Naruto. Protect that scroll with your life, Iruka shouted to the young man, who looked at him blinking in confusion. It's more dangerous than you can imagine. It holds the record of completely forbidden jutsus, Iruka shouted as Mizuki stood up on the tree branch he was on. Mizuki used you because he wants it for himself. Iruka shouted and Naruto rolled his eyes, then turned and glared at Mizuki. Naruto, even if you've read it, it will still be meaningless. Mizuki told Naruto, who inwardly scoffed. Now Mizuki was showing his true colors at least. I can show you what it means. Mizuki offered and Naruto frowned. Shut up, you fool. Iruka shouted to Mizuki. The silver-haired Chunin chuckled at that and then smirked. You know what really happened in the incident where the fox demon was sealed up again 12 years ago, don't you? Iruka questioned, accused of Mizuki, who simply smirked wider. Since that day, the people of our village have been bound by the strictest decree. Mizuki said, his eyes closed in thought. I don't remember any decree. Naruto said, looking genuinely confused for once. You wouldn't. Part of that decree was that everyone would know about it. Except you. Mizuki stated to Naruto, who narrowed his eyes. This may be my only shot at finding out why no one talks about that damn fox. Why no one tells their kids about him being sealed inside of me. I've got to press on. Naruto thought to himself with a frown. Except me. He wondered to himself. Why not me? What law are you talking about? Naruto demanded of Mizuki, who lowered his head slightly and chuckled to himself. What was the decree? What? Naruto demanded of the silver-haired Chunin, who grinned widely. That no one must ever tell you. That what you really are is the demon fox, Mizuki stated, and Naruto blinked. Damn, this guy's info is bad. If I really was the stupid fox, does he think I'd actually have put up with this village's abuse for this long without going nuts? Naruto wondered in his own mind. What are you talking about? Naruto questioned calmly, and Iruka didn't notice the look of seriousness on Naruto's face. Stop, Iruka shouted, and yet Mizuki continued. It was you who murdered Iruka's family. Mizuki accused, pointing a finger to Naruto, who let his hair shadow his eyes. In other words, you are the nine-tailed fox spirit that nearly destroyed the village. Mizuki accused, grinning at a now shaking Naruto. Until, at last, our beloved hero, the fourth Lord Hokage, trapped and bound you. In this form, Mizuki stated, and Naruto continued to shake. Stop it, Iruka shouted, hoping that Mizuki would have some sense of decency. Since then, you've been made a fool of by everyone in town. Mizuki shouted, ignoring Iruka completely. Didn't you think it was strange? To be so despised, everywhere you went? Mizuki questioned and got one of his large shuriken off his back and spun it in his hand. If you were honest, even noble Iruka would admit he hates you too. Mizuki shouted at Naruto and then grinned madly. Naruto, he shouted, and Iruka prepared to get up. You never knew a parent's love. Since the day of your birth you've been shunned by our entire village. The only one who cared for you was a boy who also had no family or home. The only real attention you could get from others was by doing things that would get you in trouble. And yet, you didn't care. Iruka thought to himself as Mizuki ran forward. No one will ever accept you. Mizuki shouted, and Iruka got up slowly. You were willing to accept any criticism, any condemnation, so long as it meant that someone was paying attention to you. Iruka's inward monologue continued as Mizuki swung his oversized shuriken towards the blonde. That scroll that you've stolen. It was the instrument of your bondage. Mizuki shouted, then laughed loudly, as Iruka groaned and then crouched, getting ready to lunge forward as fast as he could. It was a brilliant performance, Naruto. But it was all a sham, to hide your loneliness and pain, Iruka thought, and just as the shuriken was about to hit Naruto, Iruka was over Naruto in an instant, having knocked him down and taken the shuriken into his own back, blood trailing from his mouth, and Naruto's eyes widened. With my parents gone, there was no one to praise or respect me. I was so lonely. I became the class clown. Anything to attract attention. I just wanted someone to notice how good I was. To be proud of me. Being the class clown was still better than being a nobody. It hurt so much, Iruka thought to himself as tears fell from his eyes to Naruto's cheek. I know that, Naruto. I was so hard on you, yelling, scolding. It must have hurt, Iruka said, and Naruto's eyes widened. Forgive me. If I'd been a better teacher, a better person, maybe neither of us would have come to this, Iruka said to Naruto, who then saw Mizuki growl and then jumped out of the tree. Naruto looked to Iruka and then sighed. Iruka-sensei. Thank you, he said softly as a foot connected with Iruka's head, knocking him out. So what kept Ya Crow? Naruto questioned as his brother moved his foot off of Iruka and then glanced at Mizuki. Sorry I'm late Naruto. But you wouldn't believe the traffic on the way here. Crow said and Naruto rolled his eyes. Liar. He stated getting up and the two looked at a stunned and confused Mizuki. So what are we gonna do with him? He questioned and Crow chuckled darkly. Oh I don't know Naruto. Your Hokage is watching but I've made sure he can't hear us with a silence charm. How about I do the honors? Crow questioned and Naruto nodded his head in agreement. Goody. Crow said darkly and glanced at Mizuki who blinked repeatedly. What are you doing? You're protecting the demon fox spirit you fool. Why? Mizuki demanded and Crow chuckled while Naruto outright laughed at him. Man you really are an idiot Mizuki. Naruto said half laughing at the silver-haired man. To think I was the stupid fox. That has to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Naruto stated smugly, a smirk on his face as he stopped his laughing. Crow teach this old bastard a lesson. I need a quick rest. Naruto stated and then walked over to a tree carrying Iruka and sat down. Okay little bro. Crow said and then cracked his knuckles. What do you think a civilian can take me? I'm a chunin you little idiot. Mizuki demanded then boasted with an enormous grin and Crow smirked and then crouched. Oh I'm no ordinary civilian Mizuki. Crow stated then moved forward quickly with a speed not even Mizuki could follow. Ninpo. Doku Kiri. Crow shouted before quickly pulling his face mask down and breathing out a thick purple mist. Mizuki cursed then quickly jumped upward looking for the boy known as Crow. Mizuki spotted him and threw a shuriken at the boy who managed to spin out of the way. Gukaku Jutsu. Mizuki shouted and spit out a fireball from between two fingers towards Crow. Steel Shell Jutsu. Crow shouted doing hand seals quickly then crossing his arms like an X over his chest. The fireball hit Crow and Mizuki grinned as he expected to see the boy's remains as his feet touched the branch of a tree. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Came a shout from behind him and he was kicked by three smirking Narutos back into the air as Crow hit the ground. Okay Crow. He's ready, now show him what real ninja skill is. Naruto stated and Crow looked to him and grinned behind his mask as he jumped up to the tree he was in and the two Narutos launched him into the air. Crow speed past Mizuki and then made his arms go wide for wind resistance. Ninpo. Crow shouted from behind Mizuki, whose eyes widened as he turned to look back at Crow who was shadowed by the moon. Fukumi Hari. He shouted and spit out several senbon needles to hit Mizuki in the neck and then Mizuki felt his body freeze up. The two fell to the ground and Crow landed on Mizuki's back. Crow chuckled as he then pulled his mask back over his face and Mizuki twitched unable to move. What have you done to me? Mizuki demanded and Crow chuckled darkly. My needles hit a rather special nerve cluster in the back of your neck. When they did I permanently disabled the use of the rest of your body. Crow stated simply and Mizuki's eyes went wide in shocked horror. Now to finish you off slowly Mr. Mizuki. Crow said simply and then got off Mizuki and crouched down in front of him. Do you know what happened to the last few ninja to attack Naruto, Mizuki? Crow questioned with an upbeat tone and the downed ninja grunted in frustration trying to get even a small part of his body to move with no results. Well how about I show you? Crow said darkly and lifted his goggles to show his snake-like eyes. No, you, Mizuki said with his eyes wide. You can't be. Orochimaru. Be. But I thought we had a deal. He demanded and Crow chuckled darkly as he heard the accusation then the admittance. Sorry but no. I'm his nephew. Crow said darkly and made a hand seal and closed his eyes as Mizuki's shot wide open. Blood Cross Eye, first release, analysis. Crow stated opening his eyes showing his Kekkei Genkai. Now then. Blood Cross Eye, second release. Crow said and red chakra encircled his arms. Deconstruction. He stated darkly and Mizuki's eyes shot wide open as the boy's eyes changed. The cross in his eye turned blood red and the ends curved, the four orbs in between it then turned from red to white, and the rest of his eyes turned pitch black. Mizuki's own eyes seemed to be wide enough to pop out of his head as Crow then grabbed his head roughly. No one shall ever threaten my Oto ever again. Least of all some pathetic excuse for a ninja. He said darkly and grinned savagely as he looked down on Mizuki. Let's see just how much raw pain you can stomach Mizuki. Crow said darkly, his dojutsu seeming demonic, as he then grabbed Mizuki's left arm. Mizuki started to scream in raw pain as Crow then started to slowly disintegrate the skin on his arm. Once Crow was done and Mizuki had passed out, he then removed the senbons from Mizuki's neck and quickly walked over to Iruka. "We need to alter his memories, Naruto," Crow stated, and Naruto nodded his head. "Just hope no one notices that he has a memory seal after this," Crow said to himself, then pulled out a piece of paper and started to write something. "There," he said as he finished, and then moved Iruka and made a seal on the back of his neck. "Now then, mind alter jutsu," Crow stated, putting both his hand and the paper onto the seal and focusing his chakra into the paper. The paper then seemed to sink into the skin of the teacher before leaving a seal on the back of his neck. "Okay, Naruto, get over here," Crow stated, and Naruto nodded and jumped down to Crow. Crow then removed Iruka's headband. "Put this on. He's gonna make you a ninja when he wakes up. He thinks you beat Mizuki with a bunch of shadow clones," Crow stated, and Naruto smirked. "Thanks, Nissan, but isn't that cheating?" Naruto asked with a smirk, and Crow chuckled. "Oh? You can do the shadow clone jutsu, among others, which I taught you. I think you're more than qualified, so just enjoy being a ninja. Besides, if you don't make ninja, Ino, Shika, and Choji will make fun of you for the rest of your life. Or at least until you do make ninja," Crow stated, and Naruto nodded his head and went to kneel in front of Iruka. "Oh, and Naruto," Crow suddenly said, and Naruto looked to him. "Iruka has nothing but respect for you, and he thinks you're an excellent student," Crow stated, and Naruto frowned. "You make him think that?" Naruto asked, and Crow chuckled. "No, that's how he really feels about you," the masked teen stated, and Naruto's eyes widened before he smiled softly. "Now the real fun begins," Crow said, and then jumped into the trees and away from the area, leaving Naruto with Iruka. Later, Naruto with his new forehead protector and Crow sat before the Sandaime Hokage, who seemed to be scrutinizing them. "So, how long were you two planning on keeping those amazing skills of yours a secret?" Sarutobi questioned, and Crow and Naruto both grinned. "Sorry, old man, but I can't have every single young ninja in the village trying to have me train them now, can I? Naruto and a few others are special cases that I like," Crow stated with a smirk, and Sarutobi looked to Naruto. "Crow explained to me that if you show less skill than you have, that others underestimate you. And that if you overestimate yourself, that you often become arrogant. He said that by losing to those weaker to me, I was showing humility." Naruto explained, and Sarutobi nodded his head slowly. "So I take it that Naruto was acting stupid all this time?" the Hokage questioned, and Crow nodded his head. "Then you're practicing the art of the ninja. Lull your opponents into a false sense of security, then strike when they least expect it?" Sarutobi questioned, taking a puff from his pipe, and the two boys started to whistle innocently. "Not really. Just figured that Naruto needed an edge over everyone who wants to hurt him," Crow stated, rubbing the back of his neck. The Sandaime Hokage couldn't help but chuckle as the two nervous boys sat before him. "Don't worry. You've both mastered the most important lesson of any great shinobi. That fighting is not the ninja way, striking when the enemy least expects it, killing only when absolutely necessary, leaving no trace of having done the deed. That is the true way of the ninja, and you both have proven to possess this skill," Sarutobi stated, and the two grinned. Just as Crow was about to say something, they all turned when the door creaked and Naruto put on his usual dumb mask. "On guard, old man. Right?" a young brown-haired kid shouted, lunging into the room with a shuriken. But his scarf got caught in the doorway and he slammed into the ground. Naruto and Crow both looked at the kid and then blinked, though you couldn't tell thanks to Crow's mask and goggles. "If it's not one thing, it's another," Sarutobi thought to himself, pulling his hat down to shadow his eyes from view. "What's he got into this time?" came a voice from the hall as someone burst in wearing a chunin, maybe junin, outfit with a pair of dark glasses and a hitai covering his head and hair. "Aha," he stated, seeing the kid, who fell face first into the ground. "I get it. It's a trap, right?" the small boy asked while rubbing his head from where he hit the ground. This short, annoying, brash kid is known as Konohamaru, the honorable grandson of Sarutobi the Sandaime Hokage. "Hey, are you alright, honorable grandson? And for the record, there are no traps here," the man in glasses questioned of the kid, and Crow looked between the two and sighed. The man was known as Master Ebisu, the personal trainer to Konohamaru. Damn it, why couldn't one of them have been a hot chick? Crow wondered in his mind, then pulled an orange book out of his back pocket and buried his face in it. Oh great, Ni-san's reading his little orange book again. Naruto thought, annoyed as he glared at his only family as he giggled pervertedly. Now then, what's going on with that kid? Naruto wondered aloud. Kid? Konohamaru demanded, glaring at Naruto as Crow sat beside him and flipped a page in his book quickly. You, don't tell me it's… Ebisu started, then stopped as one of Crow's eyes locked on him through his goggles. Ebisu couldn't see the eye, but he could feel something he didn't like. It was like the last time he had ever seen Orochimaru. That kid wasn't normal in any way or sense of the word. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he's the one thing in the village that's protecting the so-called human form of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. AHA, so you tripped me. It was you, right? Konohamaru accused, pointing a finger at Naruto, who blinked then frowned. I may not know who this kid is, but he's messing with the wrong guy. Naruto thought to himself and grabbed Konohamaru by his scarf and lifted him up, glaring at him heatedly. You fell over your own feet. Naruto shouted at the boy, who growled at him just as angrily. Crow meanwhile turned a page in his book and giggled pervertedly, once more drawing some of Naruto's ire. Why is it every time he does that I feel like I should get Ino to hurt him? He wondered to himself in the back of his head. Unhand him, Naruto. Ebisu shouted to Naruto. That boy happens to be the grandson of our revered lord, the third Hokage. Ebisu shouted while pointing to Sarutobi, who simply took a puff of his pipe. Why is he getting me involved in this now? Sarutobi wondered to himself, annoyed. So, take your best shot, I dare you. Konohamaru stated to Naruto, who blinked. They always do this, once they know I'm the Hokage's grandson. Too afraid of me? Just like Master Four Eyes there, and everyone else in town. Ha, Konohamaru thought to himself as Naruto then growled. Okay, he's the old man's grandson, now normally I wouldn't hurt him out of respect for the old man. But this kid's just asking for it, man. Naruto thought to himself angrily. So what? I don't care if he's his grandmother. Naruto shouted and punched Konohamaru over the head. This one. He's different. Konohamaru thought to himself as he hit the ground with a dull thud. What? Ebisu shouted, and Sarutobi let out a low groan as he could feel that this meeting was going to end up biting him in the ass later. Naruto was walking through town. Crow had left saying he was going to go visit an old friend. Or in other words to Naruto, he was going home to read his perverted book. Naruto was even more annoyed that the kid, Konohamaru, was following him. He was zipping from pole to pole while they were in an alley, and when Naruto was passing a fence he noticed that someone was in front of them, only with their camouflage sideways. Quit following me, you stupid kid. Naruto shouted, turning to where Konohamaru was. I can see your right thare. He shouted at the kid, who lowered the badly done camouflage with a grin. So, you managed to penetrate my disguise, right? The rumors of your prowess don't lie. Konohamaru stated and then pointed at Naruto, whose eye twitched. What's up with this kid? He wondered to himself. Teach me your skills, and I'll become your disciple. Konohamaru stated, and Naruto's face and body language seemed to show only one thing. His utter confusion at this point. Yeah, Konohamaru shouted, and Naruto blinked, wondering what the hell was up with this kid. You've gotta teach me that Oiroke number jutsu thing you used on my grandpa. Konohamaru shouted, and Naruto blinked. Okay boss. Konohamaru shouted, and Naruto looked at him strangely. Be boss? He questioned unsurely as he looked at the exuberant face of Konohamaru. Why do I have the strangest feeling that I'm going to end up in a good deal of pain soon? Naruto wondered to himself glumly. Konohagakure no Sato, the village hidden in the leaves. Naruto woke up with a yawn and stretched his arms out. He'd had a rough day yesterday, between Konohamaru wanting to learn the Oiroke no Jutsu, and all those women attacking him. Naruto wasn't sure if he should call that training, or just hit Naruto Day. Then when he was starting to help Konohamaru with the Oiroke no Jutsu, that closet perv Ebisu came along. What did he do in a past life to deserve that? Piss in God's coffee or something? But Naruto couldn't help but snicker as he remembered the blood trail Ebisu left after getting hit with his brand new Harimu no Jutsu. Man, I've got one weird life. Naruto mused to himself, however his voice didn't sound the same. It sounded older, all things considered, and as he rose from his bed, Anyone who knew Naruto would say he was an inch or so too tall. Naruto then walked to his closet and pulled on an outfit that wasn't entirely orange. Man, if only Crow didn't always say to be like the cunning serpent who waits to strike, I wouldn't even have to act like Adobe. Naruto grumbled, then briefly looking in a mirror. Or hide how I look. Naruto sighed, resigning himself to his fate, and did a few hand seals. Illusion Shell Jutsu, he stated loudly, and his form shimmered for a few seconds before being replaced with that of the Naruto most people saw, orange outfit and all save his jacket. He then sighed and grabbed a different coat from his door and put it on. He may not be allowed to show his true self, but he could at least put on something that wasn't such an eyesore for today. This coat, unlike his normal orange and blue coat, had his red Uzumaki swirl on the arms, and was still orange, but had a black collar and stripes down the side somewhat like a tiger. Also on the back of this coat was Crow's kanji clan symbol, a black yang mark with a silver border that spiraled inward into itself. I wonder, why was it Crow said that about snakes again? Naruto suddenly wondered, then smiled to himself. Oh yeah, that was right after he took off all of those weird seals on me. Man, if he hadn't, who knows what I would have ended up acting like in the end. Naruto promptly shivered at the thought, then smiled as he remembered being himself for the first time. Although grimaced when he remembered the pain that came with it. Flashback no jutsu. Naruto was 6, and he was holding his stomach as a great pain assaulted his systems and he let out yet another pain-filled scream. Don't worry Oto, the pain will pass, you only need to endure it a little longer. Crow said, and Naruto gritted his teeth as his body began to change before Crow, whose eyes widened. The boy's body had cracks appear, and then the pieces formed by the cracks all slowly started to fall off and break into bits of chakra dust, which soon started to collect and cover the area in a multicolored fog. Damn, this is even more different from my chakra shell jutsu than I originally thought. The damn illusion was so powerful, it was actually like Naruto looked like that. Whoever made that seal was a master, and that only further convinces me that the 4th Hokage was the one to do this. Which means that Crow's eyes widened as realization struck him as to why Naruto was a Jinchuriki. Ni-san, I feel weird, Naruto said softly, and Crow looked at the boy, who was suddenly looking at his hands as though they were foreign objects now. Crow smiled from behind his bandages and then helped the boy up. He was a good inch or two taller, making Crow raise a brow. I was right. That illusion was a powerful one, meant to make him look like Yondaime. Yet make him different also. Only a little about Naruto was even real. Other than his blue eyes, it looks like he's gone through a complete and total overhaul. And if that pain is any suggestion, the chakra that was coming into his systems at a snail's pace before, is now moving into overdrive. Crow thought, fascinated despite himself, as Naruto then held his head and gritted his teeth in pain. Crow helped steady the younger boy as he almost fell from the pain in his head, his eyes widening. Uto, you okay now? Crow questioned, and Naruto looked at him with realization on his face and then grinned widely. I almost understand. Crow, please tell me what these seals were for. Tell me what right the village had to put them on me. Naruto questioned of Crow, who blinked. Major overhaul to the kid's brain, going through his mind as he looked at Naruto, then I smiled. Please sit down and I will try to explain to you what's going on to the best of my ability. Crow said, and Naruto did so without question. Crow then took a thoughtful look and paced back and forth in front of Naruto, trying to think of how to start. Well, you see Naruto, that seal is called the Kekkei Fusion. It was designed to seal beings of great power into people or objects. And now, add onto this that seal on you, that you were born on the day of the Kyuubi attack, and that you had a striking resemblance to the Yondaime Hokage. Crow left it hanging, and Naruto's eyes shot wide open. He sealed the Kyuubi in me. Naruto said softly and laid back into the couch, eyes wide in realization and amazement. Yes, it seems so. That would explain the villagers' hatred of you, as well as why you're an orphan. But Naruto, that's not the entire purpose of the seal. Added onto it was an entire seal network unlike anything I've ever seen. Crow told Naruto, then began the task of explaining to him the seals and their purposes. However, much to Crow's utter surprise, it seemed like now Naruto was a sponge for information. No matter how complex he made the explanation, it seemed that Naruto just absorbed it into himself, then studied it in his own head and finally he just seemed to understand it. Sensei said that should I find someone like that, it's best to make him an ally instead of an enemy. Besides I could use an apprentice, not to mention I do need a home. Crow mused to himself, then I smiled to the young boy. Alright Oto, your body is going to need some rest, so I think you should go to bed. Tomorrow I'll show you a jutsu so you can look like your dobi self in public whenever you leave the hotel. Crow said, and Naruto frowned while he looked at his brother. Why would I want that, Ni-san? This is who I am, why cover it with some jutsu? Why can't I be myself from now on? Naruto questioned, and Crow grinned under his bandages despite himself. Now Oto. The cunning serpent never strikes his prey first. He waits for them to come in close, and then strikes when the time is right. Crow stated, and Naruto raised a brow, not getting the analogy his brother used. Simply put, Oto, you in your dobi state can easily fool those around you into thinking you are a dobi. And since all ninja are enemies, at some point you will want to use this to your advantage. Make them think that they know who you are. Then while they underestimate you, strike hard and fast. Crow stated, and Naruto looked thoughtful for a few moments before he then nodded his head. Okay Ni-san, sounds like a good enough plan. Naruto admitted, and Crow smiled behind his mask. The only real thing I can do is listen to Crow. He obviously knows what he's doing. And I really think his snake analogy makes a good deal of sense. Why waste my energy on them if I can make them underestimate me and my abilities? That way no one will ever see my next move. Sounds like a real ninja if nothing else. Naruto mused, then yawned and headed off to bed to get some rest. Flashback no jutsu, Kai. Naruto smiled as he remembered that day, the first day he learned to be a ninja really. The first day he learned of the art of deception and giving your enemies a false sense of security. Oh, he enjoyed that part of Crow's plan, that was for sure. He then walked over to his bedside counter and picked up his new Hite 8 and put it on, also still lost in his thoughts. Hey Naruto, get a move on, I just finished breakfast. And unless you want me to throw it out before you head to school, you better get out here. Came a shout from Crow, and Naruto chuckled and disguised his voice. Be right there Ni-san. He shouted and ran out to have breakfast with his brother, then head off to the academy to meet his new team. Konoha Ninja Academy. Naruto sat down next to the biggest emo he had ever known in all of his short life. Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto, what are you doing here? Asked a kid with a puppy in his jacket, and Naruto blinked and looked at him with a confused expression. Class today is only for the students who didn't fail, he stated, and Naruto frowned, glancing at him annoyedly. This guy isn't very observant. It's no wonder my mask never fails. With everyone in Konoha it's always look at what you see, and never underneath the underneath. Naruto inwardly mused but grinned outwardly at the Inuzuka boy. What are you, blind? Check the headband, dolt. Naruto stated, and the kid looked at him dumbfounded. Yes, I love that look, it's absolutely priceless, man. If not for that look every time I do something amazing for me, I'd swear this stupid mask of mine wasn't worth all the trouble. Naruto thought to himself with a grin on his face as he saw the Inuzuka's reaction to what he said. The boy, however, grumbled something, then walked to a seat and sat down, his puppy climbing to his head. Well, at least you made it, Naruto. It would have been too troublesome to have to wait a year for to be a shinobi. Shikamaru Nara said from behind Naruto, his head down, and Naruto looked at him with a grin. He was sitting down looking annoyed, his hair pulled up into a pineapple-shaped ponytail, a gray short-sleeved jacket over a netted shirt, his Hite 8 tied to his left upper arm, a pair of gray shinobi pants with a kunai holster on his right leg, and a pair of blue shinobi sandals. Shikamaru Nara, heir to the Nara family's shadow manipulation type jutsu and the living shadow, Kekkei Genkai. He's a lazy ass who has to be truly the most sleepy guy in all of Konoha. His hobbies are playing shogi and watching the clouds. Crow tried to teach him some things, but instead he just had me play shogi with him so I could develop my tactics a bit more. Of course he's so lazy he wasn't even interested in telling others my secret, saying it would be too troublesome. Naruto thought to himself silently. Shikamaru was also one of the only people besides Crow to actually know what he was really like. He was also one of Naruto's very best friends. Sheesh, Shikamaru, have more faith in me, will you? Naruto said with a smirk to his friend, who smirked back at him. Shikamaru then yawned and laid his head down, closing his eyes, and Naruto snickered as the laziest ninja ever went to bed by land. "Hey Naruto, you up for Ikaraku after class? Hey, is that a new coat?" asked a chubby boy who was actually pretty fat in reality but hurt anyone who said that, while he munched on some potato chips. His name is Choji Akamichi, and he is another of the few people like Shikamaru who knows Naruto's secret. He is indeed fat, with a pair of swirls on his cheeks, silver earrings like Shikamaru, and beady eyes. He wears a white t-shirt that has a red kanji for eat on it, a green jacket and pale blue-gray scarf over it. A pair of dark gray shinobi pants with his kunai pouch on his right thigh, blue shinobi sandals, wrappings around his hands, and his headband was designed so his brown hair came out of the sides. "Short Choji, but we can't stay long. Crow wants me and my training partners in early today, for some last-minute training. And yeah, figured I might as well wear a new one for a nice change of pace," Naruto said, and Choji nodded with a small frown on his face as he went back to eating his bag of chips. Naruto then brought another of his self-proclaimed Naruto files up on Choji and smirked. "Choji Akamichi, he's a nice guy, and he, myself, Ino, and Shikamaru have been friends for a long time now. He's also the heir to the Akamichi family and its own Kekkei Genkai of stored energy. This is where they eat mountains of food, and while gaining fat, it converts itself into chakra for some of their strongest attacks. Choji is the only member of our little group who doesn't want training from Crow besides Shikamaru. He says it's cause he doesn't like to hold back, and I can respect that about him. He's honest about everything, whether it's his skills or his opinions." Naruto mused to himself, then blinked and looked around the room. "So where's Ino? She not make the cut or what?" Naruto asked, and Shikamaru nodded to the door while Choji was busy with his chips. Ino was coming in with Sakura, and they were both talking about their respective crush happily. Ino Yamanaka is a pretty pale blonde girl with pupilless blue eyes and a lithe figure. She wore a purple top that looked to have a scarf attached to it with 3 rings in it, a purple skirt with slits down the sides, her hite 8 wrapped around her waist like a belt, arm warmers of the same design of Sasuke, blue shinobi sandals, and wrappings under most of her clothing. She always kept her hair in a high ponytail, some of her bangs curving down her right cheek. Sakura Haruno, she was cute, though Naruto personally believed she was way too violent. She had long pink hair with her hite 8 holding some of it back, emerald green eyes, and a figure similar to Ino's, only less curvy. She wore a red, somewhat Chinese-looking dress that had a circle on the back and upper arms and slits down her thighs, a pair of tight black shorts with her kunai holster on her right leg, and blue shinobi sandals. Naruto knew both of them, Ino more so than Sakura, though that was only because Ino often visited Crow while Sakura tried to catch Sasuke. Ino Yamanaka, heir to the Yamanaka clan family's secret techniques, and their loose persona. Kekkei Genkai, not to mention Crow's #1 fangirl. She personally doesn't dislike me, and we've managed to have a somewhat friendship through her wanting to be my friend to get to Crow. This at least has given us some knowledge on one another, and has also let me and Crow tell her about who I really am. Her specialty is mostly in her family's secret jutsu and some basic ninjutsu. She's just as physically trained as me or Hinata thanks to Ni-san, so basically she can kick anybody's ass if they fuck with her. Naruto thought to himself, then looked to the other girls silently, bringing up what little info he had on her. Sakura Haruno, she's cute, her forehead is somewhat larger than normal, but it's not ugly like some people seem to think. She has a temper problem, however, as I remember when she would constantly beat me up for sitting next to Sasuke a few years back. Of course that soon stopped when I mentioned the other seat beside of him was free. Her main strength is her immense intellect and knowledge of jutsu theory. Her weakness is that she's so into Sasuke that she hasn't trained and instead has made herself skinny by not eating enough, thus she's physically pretty weak. Naruto thought to himself as Sakura looked at Sasuke with adoring eyes, and he rolled his "Move it, Naruto. I need to get around you," Sakura stated to Naruto, who rolled his eyes. Today Sasuke must have decided to sit too close to the edge, so he'd have to move or listen to Sakura's Banshee Whale no Jutsu, which no one in the class wanted. Yeah Sakura, Naruto muttered and moved out of her way, annoyed enough by her grating voice as Ino looked apologetically to him. Naruto took his seat back as Sakura happily sat next to the brooding Uchiha kid while some of the girls in the back glare at her. And Naruto pulled up another of his mental files out on the dark kid. Sasuke Uchiha, last of his clan, the major heartthrob to the girls of the class, and the heir to the Sharingan, or otherwise known as the Mirror Wheel Eye. He's skilled in taijutsu and ninjutsu, but his genjutsu really needs some work. He's trained all his life, but as far as I know he doesn't seem like much of a threat at the moment. Crow, who has admitted he can only use supplementary jutsu, due to the fact chakra can't go any further than an inch off his skin, could even take him. Of course that's not saying much. Crow can take me, Ino, and Hinata with only minor difficulty, for crying out loud. Naruto thought to himself, then smirked as he examined Sasuke, or rather his outward appearance. Sasuke Uchiha always has one of three looks on his face: annoyed, brooding, and last was smirking at your inferiority. He has black spiky hair in the exact same style as Crow and vice versa. His eyes are black like most Uchiha were, his skin is pale, and he seems to train quite a bit. He wears a blue short-sleeved high-collared shirt with a fan symbol on the back, arm warmers, a pair of white shorts with his kunai holster on his right leg, wrappings around his lower legs, and a pair of blue shinobi sandals over his feet. At one point Ino and Sakura had both had a crush on Sasuke, which soon led to them fighting over Sasuke and ending their friendship. But Crow had intervened with that, not wanting to see friends fighting with one another over a boy. Naruto smirked as he remembered that encounter Crow had told him about. Ino was actually glad that Crow had managed to set her and Sakura straight back when he did. Otherwise she was sure their friendship wouldn't have come back anytime soon. She really did prefer having her best friend and no malice between them, even if she did still call her names sometimes. Ino sighed as she remembered the day that Crow came and gave them back their friendship. Flashback no jutsu. Ino and Sakura were fighting while walking through the park, having just lost track of Sasuke Uchiha. This had become the norm for Konoha after the two had both admitted to each other about their crush on Sasuke. "Shut up, forehead girl. Sasuke likes me best. I am the most beautiful girl in all of Konoha," the blonde told the pink-haired girl smugly, and Sakura bristled, glaring at her former blonde friend. "No, you shut up, Ino pig. Sasuke would like me more than a blonde bimbo like you," Sakura shouted, and both didn't notice as a certain bandaged young man was walking by them while reading his little orange book. The two girls looked like they were about to go at one another's throats, but were grabbed from the side. Crow saw this, then inwardly groaned. He hated when friends were turned into enemies because of something as trivial as a crush. "Now why are you two fighting?" the masked boy inquired, his book hidden away, his eyes out in the open and staring at the two unblinkingly. The two girls turned, and promptly forgot their fight as soon as they saw those mismatched snake-like eyes. Both shivered seeing the eyes. Girls shouldn't fight over such trivial things as boys. It only leads to hatred and heartbreak, Crow stated, and then released the girls. "What do you know about this? Huh, snake eyes?" Ino questioned, and Crow Eyes smiled to the two. "Only that it's supposed to be boys fighting over girls, not the other way around." Crow told the two seriously, and Ino and Sakura both blinked. "And besides that, why would anyone want to fight over someone else?" Crow asked the two simply, and Ino blinked, then started to think about why she would rather fight with Sakura than give up on Sasuke. Because Sasuke is the coolest. And only the most beautiful girl can even hope to win his heart," Ino said, and Sakura nodded, making Crow raise a brow. "So, by getting this Sasuke kid you want to prove who's most beautiful?" Crow questioned, and the two blinked. "Seems kind of shallow if you ask me," Crow stated, and the two girls started to gape at the young boy's words. "And no, you're just twisting our words," Sakura stated, and Crow raised a brow, then smirked behind his bandages and gave both a look that asked, "Really?" He then took on a serious look, his arms crossing over his chest. "This crush of yours isn't worth destroying such a good friendship. You two were such good friends before this silly Sasuke crush happened. How can you let it destroy what you both worked so hard to build?" Crow asked the two girls, who looked down, hearing the disappointment in his tone of voice. Sakura then looked at him and tried to tell him, getting stars in her eyes. "But Sasuke is just so cool and so good looking," and Crow interrupted the girl by placing his hand on her mouth to silence her. "Listen to me here, girls. A crush is not worth its weight in gold. You both see Sasuke, and rather than seeing him for what he is, you see him for his attitude and looks. You should never go that way, girls, that will only lead you to a painful journey of heartache. Crow stated, then crossed his arms and looked between the two and nodded his head. Now I want you both to think of why you like Sasuke, then I want you to ask yourself, if he's really worth giving up your first and best friend for over a crush. Crow told the girls, who blinked then did so, closing their eyes as they did so. And for the first time in a long time, the two actually thought about what they had given up in order to go after Sasuke. Sakura had lost the only friend she had and lost a lot of self-confidence when she wasn't able to protect herself anymore. Ino had lost one of the only female friends she had, and she lost someone who she thought of as a little sister. Was it really worth it all, to give that up? Flashback no Jutsu, Kai. At first the two seemed to simply stay out of one another's way after that. But it was Ino in the end who finally cracked and went to Crow for help in getting their friendship back on track. The young man had given her advice and told her what she had to do if she wanted Sakura as her friend. She had to make a choice, friendship or her crush on Sasuke. Which was more important to her? Suffice it to say, Ino gave up on Sasuke to gain her friend back. However, she also gained a small crush on Naruto's big brother because of his hand in bringing their friendship back from the grave. So she had started to follow either Naruto or Crow. The two couldn't do anything without Ino behind them sometimes, or simply popping out of nowhere to see her new crush, the enigmatic Crow, as some of his fans called him. Of course, nowadays he has a fan club much like Sasuke, due mostly because he was often working on their hotel's roof, and with his skin-tight shirt it didn't hide any of his toned body. Of course, another reason he so quickly gained a fan club was because of how utterly nice he was to any and all women. This was cause, no matter what he said, Naruto knew he was a lecher and couldn't really resist any pretty girl's charms no matter what. Ino knew this, but that didn't deter her, just made her hit him a lot when he tried to flirt with other girls in her presence. Naruto grinned as he thought of the 100 times that happened. Ino was basically the leader of Crow's fan club while Sakura was Sasuke's, and the two regained their friendship thanks to Naruto's masked brother leaving no malice between them any longer. "Hey Ino," Naruto said to the blonde blue-eyed girl. Said girl grinned and sat next to her other blonde friend, then looked at him with a grin still on her face. "Hey Naruto, how did you manage to pass the test?" Ino asked, and Naruto grinned right back at the girl. "You know me, Ino, the #1 most surprising shinobi in all of Konoha." Naruto told her with a smirk, and Ino rolled her eyes. "Would both you blondes stop being so troublesome? I'm trying to rest here." Shikamaru set his head down and looking at the two, still half asleep as his two blonde friends grinned. Shikamaru was the brains of their little group. Choji was the muscle. Naruto was known as the frontman, as he could take so much damage. Hinata was their all-seeing eyes, and Ino proclaimed herself the beautiful flower of their group. Crow was like the leader, or something to that effect, as he constantly managed to train those who wanted it to be stronger, more skilled shinobi. Yeah, but you really need to stop being so lazy, Shikamaru. Sooner or later you'll have to become more active," Ino stated to Shikamaru, who mumbled something, and Naruto chuckled to himself. He then looked around and spotted the only other person in the know about his secret. Her name was Hinata Hyuga, heir to the Hyuga family's Kekkei Genkai, the Byakugan, and all of its secrets. She had short, very dark violet hair, pale lavender eyes, and pale skin. However, that was pretty common in the Hyuga clan. She wore her Hitai 8 around her neck, a brown hooded coat with the Hyuga symbol on her left shoulder and fur along the bottom, dark shinobi pants with her kunai holster on her right thigh, and blue shinobi sandals. Naruto then took the time to open the file he had mentally stored away on her from his mind and smirked. Hinata Hyuga, she seems really shy on the surface, and was before Crow had a talk with her a few years back. She took a 180 after that and can hold her own in a fight now. She's not completely over her shyness, of course, but she's not as bad as when I first met her. The fighting style Crow taught her was heavy on chakra manipulation and defensive moves to go with her gentle fist-style taijutsu. She's not mastered it, but then again, only someone like Crow could master any of his techniques, and I should know. I've tried, Naruto thought to himself with a small frown as he remembered his brother's odd jutsu. Naruto looked at the, seemingly, shy and quiet Hinata with a smirk as she had her hands together, her index fingers pressing together slightly. If he got an award for his performance, then Hinata would have gotten a trophy for hers. She hadn't been very shy since Crow's talk with her all those years ago. Naruto did wonder what they talked about, but Crow always said it was personal, and if Hinata wanted him to know, he'd had to ask her. Hinata on the other hand vividly remembered what Crow did and said for her. In fact, he was the entire reason she was as strong as she was, especially seeing as her father no longer tried to help or train her. She also loved being able to be around her inspiration, aka Naruto. Even after she found out Naruto always held back, she found a reason to admire him, some of the reasons being his humble attitude, and his caring and loyal nature towards his friends. Hinata smiled as she thought of Naruto. Then she thought of the day she met Crow and learned how truly strong she could be if she put her mind to it. Flashback no jutsu. So anyways, I was thinking, Crow, why can't we combine the chakra shell with an element or something? Naruto questioned as he and Crow walked down the street, the older boy's head starting to hurt because of that idea. It had been 2 years since Crow came to Konoha and no one wanted to get on the bad side of Naruto's Ni-san, for fear of being disintegrated like any of the unlucky fools who attacked them. Oto, the reason that would be bad is because of the reason I almost didn't teach you the chakra shell jutsu in the first place. Too much chakra combined with an element and you have the very likely chance of having yourself be ripped apart by the shell exploding. Crow stated, and Naruto blinked, then grimaced. Oh, right, I forgot that. I'm so used to the chakra shell that it's just become second nature for me to use it. Naruto said, and Crow nodded his head slowly, then suddenly stopped completely. Something the matter, Ni-san? Naruto questioned, stopping to look at Crow, who shook his head. Nah, you go on ahead to Ichiraku and I'll meet you there, he stated, and Naruto shrugged and then walked to the Ichiraku ramen shop with a small smile on his face. Crow then turned and crossed his arms over his chest while looking at a nearby tree. Alright, come out or the tree's going down, Crow stated, and a young 8-year-old Hinata Hyuga looked out from behind the tree shyly. Crow blinked seeing the Hyuga girl and raised a brow. Weren't all Hyuga supposed to be stuck-up pricks with a stick lodged up their butts? And if so, then where did this Hyuga come from? I am sorry. I didn't mean to follow you, the young girl stuttered, and Crow blinked then walked over to her. He saw as she closed her eyes and then seemed to shake and his eyes narrowed dangerously. Shy and fearful, whenever someone comes near her she visibly flinches or outright closes her eyes. This is usually somewhat similar to when a person is abused for failure or butting into others' business. There's a bruise on her leg that resembles a hand, meaning that she must have been hit there pretty hard or grabbed roughly. She carries herself in a slump, signifying she's very depressed. Crow thought a frown coming to his face under his bandages. She's been mentally abused and physically pushed beyond her current limits. Without the mind in the training, her body won't really be able to do much. This leads me to assume that she at one time was fairly proficient in fighting, but something happened and made her lose her confidence. Since she's a Hyuga and so nice, I suspect her clan's council had this done to make sure she didn't try and unite the main and branch houses so they could keep their power. Crow thought, growling on the inside, but shook his head as he saw Hinata open one eye. Now what's you name? Crow asked with an eye smile, and little Hinata blinked. Hinata Hyuga. Hinata stuttered and Crow nodded his head. Tell me, Hinata, would you like to be strong? Crow questioned pleasantly, and Hinata looked down to the ground. I could never be strong. I am just a weakling, Hinata said, and Crow's eye twitched in blind fury. The Hyuga better hope and pray that he doesn't find any of them anytime soon, or him removing the Byakugan would be the least of their worries. Now Hinata, that's not true. Anyone can be strong with the right dedication and heart. In fact, I'm sure you'll be just as strong as me if you put your mind to it, Crow stated, putting a hand on Hinata's left shoulder. The young dark-haired girl still didn't look sure, however, and Crow decided to pull out his trump card. Besides, you'd be able to spend time with Naruto, Crow said, hoping he was right about the reason she was following them, and if the widening of her eyes and the blush on her face was any indication. Oh okay, she said, and Crow couldn't help but grin as he nodded and told Hinata to meet him at Naruto's place the next day for training. Flashback no jutsu. Kai. Of course, Crow knew about her crush, and actually tried to help her with her stutter and shy nature. They'd managed to get it to a point where she only did that when she was excited or around Naruto. How Crow did this was unknown, as she still acted like she was weak and nervous around her clan. Only her few friends knew about her true skills. Now why would she do this is a question many would ask. Her answer is because she doesn't want her sister Hanabi to have to end up in the branch family and have the caged bird seal put on her if she can help it at least. Naruto sighed as he laid his head halfway down till he smiled. His closest friends all managed to pass the test, that was good. Then he looked around at the others who had managed to pass the test. One was a boy, tanned skin, beady slit-like eyes, and red triangle marks painted on her cheeks. He was in a gray hooded coat that had fur lining it, with brown shinobi pants with his kunai holster on his right thigh, his hite-8 around his head, and blue shinobi sandals. This boy was Kiba Inuzuka, someone Naruto sometimes would escape class with and pull pranks out through the city. The boy was currently leaning forward, his eyes closed, and a puppy with cream-colored fur was on his head looking around. Kiba Inuzuka, heir to the Inuzuka clan's secrets and their Kekkei Genkai of wild speak. He's a pretty cool guy unless you get on his bad side, which is pretty easy with his short temper. He and I have been pranking the school for years now, and he always gets a kick out of it. He's proficient in taijutsu, but his genjutsu and ninjutsu need a little work, and he defenantly needs to learn some strategy, or else he might end dead against someone who uses his head. Naruto mused to himself, then looked at the shadowed corner of the room where a strange boy was sitting, a small bug on his finger. He was Shino Aburame. He had brown spiky hair with his hite-8 around his forehead, dark sunglasses covering his eyes, and wears a gray jacket that covered the bottom half of his face from view, a pair of brown ninja pants, his kunai holster on his right thigh, and a pair of blue shinobi sandals. Shino Aburame, heir to the Aburame clan and their bug contract, Kekkei Genkai, which basically makes them all into a living bug nest. Kind of gross but exceptionally useful in battle if you want to attack your enemies without getting too close. Shino is pretty quiet and, unlike the others, never boasts how tough he is. In fact, I haven't heard him say one complete sentence in all the time I've known him. Naruto thought to himself, slightly annoyed about not knowing anything more about Shino despite himself being excellent at information retrieval. Naruto, however, shook his head and looked at the last three people worth noticing remaining in class. The first was Kairi Inuzuka. She had shoulder-length burnt red hair, green eyes, and purple rectangle marks on each of her cheeks. She wears a gray sleeveless GI top without the sleeves and ends at her mid-thigh to act like a skirt. A black and red obi was tied around her waist to hold it down on her slim waist. A brown leather belt over that with her shuriken holster on the side. A pair of black wristbands with steel plates over the top of each, bandages around her hands and forearms underneath them. A pair of black stockings that reached to her mid-thigh and didn't have toes. A pair of black shinobi sandals with metal at the back of her heels, and a sword strapped to her belt. Kairi Inuzuka, one of the premier kunoichi 3 of the class. Her specialty is in taijutsu and kenjutsu. Her weakness is her limited ability in dispelling and using genjutsus, much like myself. She's nice to everyone, unlike her cousin Kiba, who sometimes talks like he's better than everyone else. She's also one of the only non-fangirl kunoichi in the entire class and actually works to be a good shinobi. I only know her in passing, but what I do know is that she doesn't have a dog, unlike the rest of her family, as apparently only the Inuzuka with red triangles on their face have an animal to fight with. The rest have to work with what they're given, or a sword in her case. Naruto thought to himself with a nod, then looked to the girl beside of her to the right. This girl was Arisa Kurama. She had blonde, choppy shoulder-length hair, pupilless blue eyes, and pale skin. She wore a fishnet shirt with a black jacket on over it, her hite-8 around her neck like Hinata, a pair of tight black shinobi shorts with her kunai holster on her right thigh, a black leather belt around her waist over her fishnet shirt, and black shinobi sandals. She looked like the kind of girl no one wanted to mess with if the fact she was glaring at some idiot attempting to hit on her was any indication. In fact, as Naruto watched her, he gulped as she used a genjutsu on him that made her look invisible so she wouldn't have to stand the boy's constant chatter anymore. Arisa Kurama, heir to the Kurama clan and their living illusions, Kekkei Genkai. Thanks to her Kekkei Genkai, she's able to flawlessly produce genjutsu and even cause real physical damage to the unlucky fools trapped in them. Besides being an expert in genjutsu, she's also proficient in medical jutsus and is the second member of the Kunoichi 3. She's nice enough unless you fuck with her, and then she'll more than like kick your ass because she don't take anyone's shit. Sasuke actually likes her, she's so tough and hard to get to. I'll admit she's kinda pretty, but she absolutely hates guys like Sasuke and stays clear of him as much as she can. Besides that, I think she likes seeing people who belong together become a couple, and even helps them using her illusions sometimes. Her clan is slowly dwindling to nothing, but Arisa wants to try and rebuild her clan back to its former glory by becoming a strong kunoichi. Naruto personally would rather not get into a fight with this particular girl. No matter how tough you were, if she used a genjutsu, he'd hate to be on the receiving end when it really happened. Naruto quickly shook his head, however, and looked to the girl on Kairi's left side, the final member of the Kunoichi 3, and the most skilled ninjutsu user the school had seen in years, not to mention a childhood friend of Naruto's. Kasara Hitaki. She had black eyes, spiky shoulder-length silver hair that covers her right eye, and pale skin. She wore her Hite 8 around her head and a black face mask like her father Kakashi Hitaki, a fishnet shirt under a green and red armored vest that cut off just above her navel, a pair of tight black shorts with a white skirt that had slits down the sides, and her kunai holster on her right thigh. A pair of belts were strapped around her chest in an X pattern and held a short tanto to her back. Black shinobi sandals that reached up to the middle of her shins and had bands holding them on tightly with metal plates on the back of each heel and wrappings around the top of her feet. And lastly, armored bands were covering her forearms and her wrists. Naruto couldn't help but smile seeing his old friend looking bored as hell as she sat back in her seat staring out a window. Kasara Hitaki, daughter of Kakashi Hitaki, or Sharingan Kakashi, the man who copied 1,000 jutsus, and the final member of the Kunoichi 3. Her main specialty is like her father, ninjutsu, but she's no slouch in taijutsu or genjutsu either. She's tomboyish, though I don't think she dresses like it. Loves her dad but wishes he wasn't so lazy and would stop reading a certain orange book. Is very confident without being full of herself. Has a keen intellect and big heart. And is generally thought of to be the best kunoichi of our class, maybe the entire school. I have learned that she is also somewhat insecure about herself, as with a father like hers she's trying to live up to one hell of a legacy. Naruto nodded to himself, then sighed as he laid his chin on his arms and waited for their teacher Iruka to finally show up. Naruto closed his eyes and let himself listen to the people around him. Not much was going on besides the chatter of who would do what now that they were ninja. Naruto actually knew thanks to sneaking a look at the roster for the teams, so couldn't help but smirk. It was then that Iruka walked in and Naruto opened his eyes to watch him. Alright everyone, I'd like to say it's been an honor to teach all of you. And that from this day forward you are no longer mere students of ninjutsu, but full-fledged shinobi. But among the ranks of the shinobi, you are mere novices, lowest of the low. Your greatest challenges still lie ahead of you. Iruka announced, and Naruto rolled his eyes. The next step is the assignment of official duties to you all on behalf of our village. We will begin by dividing you all into 3-man teams, each of which will be mentored by a Junin, a more senior ninja. Iruka set his arms behind his back as he gave out his speech, a small smile gracing his lips. Who will guide and coach you as you become familiar with your various assignments? Iruka announced, and several different thoughts ran through the different students of the class at that moment. 3-man teams? Sounds like too many. Sasuke thought, his fingers laced before his face, dark eyes set on the teacher. It's perfect. I know they'll team me up with Sasuke. Sakura thought to herself, triumphantly pumping a fist, while Ino groaned. Why was her friend always so crazy when Sasuke was around? This ought to be interesting. If my team are substandard like some of the idiots who passed, then maybe I can whip them into shape. Although I hope Kasara's on my team. Naruto thought to himself, eyes still half-lidded as he looked at Iruka boredly. Man, this is all just too troublesome. I already know they're gonna team me up with Ino and Choji. Shikamaru thought, then closed his eyes and started to sleep, having already seen the team roster when he got his license. I hope my teammates aren't like that Sasuke kid, he's such a pain-ass man. Arisa thought and growled as her left eye started to twitch at the mere thought of the Uchiha boy trying to rebuild his clan. With her, as he always put it. Please, oh please, Kami-sama, let me be on Naruto's team. Hinata hoped with a small blush on her face. I hope I get to be on a team with some lovely ladies, oh yeah. Kiba hoped with a large grin, Akamaru wondering why his owner was doing so. Come on, just tell us the damn team lineup already. Ino thought, annoyed with the long speech Iruka had given out already. Finally, I'll get to show Dad I'm just as fine a ninja as him. Kasara vowed to herself, determined not to let down her father. If Kiba's on my team, I swear I'll kill him. He called me his bitch last week and I almost neutered him. If it wasn't for Sume, I swear I would have too. Then again, she said I could if he did that again. Kairi thought, her right eye twitching as her hand itched to take hold of her sword and cut off a piece of her cousin's anatomy. I wonder if Mom's making ribs or steak tonight. Choji wondered to himself thoughtfully while still eating from his bag of chips. Obviously, Shino's not much of a thinker or a talker. He just liked to mock everyone with his existence. Alright now class, I've made up each team to balance out each of its members' individual abilities. Iruka said, bringing out a notepad as the class roared with a loud what. Naruto tuned out Iruka after that and listened for one of the ninja he was sure would pass, although did hear Iruka say that only 30 were passing this year and that they expected less than half to make it to full-fledged genin. Next, Team 6, Kasara Hitaki, Orisa Kurama, and Kairi Inuzuka. Iruka announced, making Naruto realize they had kept the Kunoichi 3 together, and Kiba stood up and slammed his fists into the table. Hey, what are you doing? They're the best 3 Kunoichi in the entire school. And you're pairing them all together. How's that supposed to be even? Kiba demanded, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Was the mud really that dense? Iruka sighed and looked to the young Inuzuka boy, grimacing slightly as he hoped he would calm down or something if he made genin. Actually, Kiba, while they all did get top scores, each one of them is severely lacking in certain aspects that the other makes up for. So as it is, Kasara may be good at taijutsu and excellent at ninjutsu, Orisa is better at genjutsu and medical jutsu than her, and Kairi's better at ken and taijutsu than the others. Each one has their own individual skills that are off balance. In this formation they make a team that can go on all-around missions. Any type their team is made ready to be suited for it no matter what. Iruka explained, and Kiba muttered something and sat back down. Iruka sighed and then looked to his noteboard and read off the next team. Next, Team 7, Sakura Haruno, Naruto Uzumaki, and Sasuke Uchiha. Iruka said, and Sakura jumped for joy while Naruto wished he didn't have to be stuck with the fangirl and the guy with a stick shoved way up his butt. Next, Team 8, Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame. Iruka said, and Ino and Naruto both sent Hinata a pitying glance as Kiba literally jumped for joy. Hinata sunk into her arms and silently cursed Kami for doing this to her when she asked him to put her with Naruto. Shino was indifferent for now. Team 9 will carry on from last year, and last is Team 10, which will consist of Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akamichi. Iruka said, and the Ino Shika Cho trio rolled their eyes. Shikamaru cause he already knew, Ino cause she figured that they were being put together like their dads, and Choji for the same reason as Ino. Okay, everyone, I'll be introducing your Junin instructors this afternoon at 4 o'clock. I suggest getting here a bit early as some of them like coming in a little too early. Until then, you're dismissed. Iruka said, smiling brightly, and Naruto sighed and got up. Hey, why are you wearing a new jacket, Dobi? Came a question from the brooding Uchiha, and Sakura blinked as she hadn't even paid any attention to that. Naruto inwardly sighed and opened his excuses for the things I do mental folder and then told him factly. Cause it's a nice jacket and I wanted to wear it when I became a shinobi. Also cause it has my Ni-san's clan symbol on the back. Naruto told Sasuke, and the brooding Uchiha simply grunted and got up to leave. I seriously need to find a way to remove whatever was shoved up his butt one of these days. Otherwise we're not going to last very long as a team. Naruto thought to himself, then walked out of the room. However, before he could, he felt a hand being placed on his shoulder and looked to his side to see Kasara standing there. So, new jacket, and you're all quiet today. That's not like you, Naruto. She stated, and Naruto blinked before grinning brightly. Hey, that's not true. Besides, I'm only quiet cause I'm sleepy. I was up celebrating all night with Ni-san and forgot to go to bed early enough. Naruto explained, and Kasara looked at him for a good while then shrugged. Whatever, Naruto, it's none of my business. But if you ever need someone to talk to, My door's always open for a friend," Kasara said, and Naruto couldn't help but smile as she walked out of the room. "If I have a crush on anyone, it's that girl right there. She's smart, nice, kind, funny," he thought to himself, and walked out of the room and then headed for Ichiraku to meet up with Choji, then head for Crow's training area, all while in a daze really as he thought of a certain silver-haired kunoichi. Crow was in a crouched position and stalking an elusive prey, eyes focused ahead of himself. His target was directly ahead and unsuspecting. He grinned as his prey made its first mistake by turning. Now he only needed to get a little closer in. "Hey Ni-san," Naruto said, and Crow fell to his face, the young woman he had been stalking walking away with a thoughtful look on her pretty face. "Chasing skirts again?" Naruto asked, crossing his arms as Ino and Hinata came from different directions. "No, I was trying to." "Never mind, now that you're all finally here, training can finally begin," Crow said while getting up, then looked to Naruto. "When do you guys got to be back at the school anyways?" Naruto closed one eye thinking about it, then sighed as he remembered what Iruka said to them. "In about 3 hours," he stated flatly, and Crow groaned loudly, slapping his face. "Great," he said sarcastically, then shook his head and took on a serious posture. "Let's get to the training ground, then I'll think about what we need to do," Crow said, and the group of 4 walked into the forest of death. Crow led them through the forest till they reached a clearing in the middle of some giant trees which Crow had found the same year he first arrived in Konoha. "Alright, seeing as we've only got limited time and we probably won't be training together for a while, so no limiter seals for now, release them and we can begin," Crow stated, and Naruto grinned widely. "Really?" Naruto asked, excited, and Crow nodded his head. "Alright," Naruto shouted, and then rolled up the sleeves of his jacket and removed his sandals. On his forearms and around his ankles were black marks. They were designed to look like chains of some sort on Naruto. Ino had the same thing, only they looked more like vines with thorns on them. And Hinata's looked as though they were made of waves circling her wrists and ankles. The 3 then bit one of their fingers and spread the blood on one of the seals. "Kai," they all said at once, and the seals all seemed to break, then started to travel to the point the blood was, and then became a simple tattoo on each of them of different variations. Instantly Naruto jumped and reached at the least 4 feet into the air before falling back down and grinning like a madman. "Oh yeah, I forgot how good it felt not to be restricted so much," Naruto stated happily, and Hinata nodded her head. Ino was stretching out some as she always had the most trouble with that damn seal on. "So what's the training today going to be, Ni-san?" Naruto asked his older brother, who then looked to the sky and then at them. They all paled as they could almost see the evil, insidious grin that he had on. "You all have to fight me," he stated, and then blinked. "That's all?" Naruto asked, and Crow chuckled slightly. "Let me rephrase that then, Naruto," he stated, and removed his gloves and sandals. He also had the limiter seals on, only these looked like some kind of snakes were coiled around his wrists and ankles. He quickly used one of his claws and cut the tip of one of his thumbs before smearing it onto one of the snakes. Instantly he pumped some chakra into it, and the snakes all vanished before a single winged serpent tattoo appeared on his right forearm. Crow then started to stretch his own body before jumping up to at least 10 feet in the air and landing on his feet when coming down, leaving his students wide-eyed. The young man though replaced his sandals and gloves and smirked underneath his mask as he looked at the 3 young graduates. "You'll be fighting me, while I have no restrictions, and you all have to make sure none of you are hurt," Crow stated before pulling a timer out of his vest and turned it around, setting it for 3 hours. "You all have 2.5 hours to try and stop me. Any jutsu, of any style or type, are available save any forbidden or fatal jutsu," Crow stated, and the 3 nodded their heads. Crow then walked over to a tree and placed the timer in it, and then turned to the 3 graduates. "Ready, begin," Crow said, then shouted, and the 3 rookies all jumped into the trees. "This should keep me amused," Crow thought to himself, looking around himself before walking to the center of the clearing and sitting down in a lotus position, closing his eyes. Naruto, Hinata, and Ino were all standing in the trees, just staring at where the older teen is sitting silently, eyes closed and seemingly asleep. "What's he doing? Taunting us?" Ino asks, slightly annoyed with Crow. Although Ino likes Crow, she can get easily annoyed with 2 things about him: his constant lechery and his sometimes eccentric behavior. "No, he's using that weird meditation thing of his again," Hinata says softly and Naruto nods his head. What weird meditation thing are you guys talking about? Ino questions and the other two look at her and blink. Oh right, you were sick when it happened last time. Naruto stated and Ino tilted her head. Well, it's hard to explain really, but he somehow knows where we are based solely on scent, sound, and feel right now. Hinata has no idea how he does it and I've only got a slightly better one than her. Naruto explains and Ino blinks. Maybe you two should tell me what happened last time. She states and the other two nod their heads slowly then begin the tale. Flashback no jutsu. Crow sat in the same way he would in only a few years, only with Tora and Suzaku strapped to his back. He had his eyes closed and all traces of his life seeming non-existent while he sat in wait of the attack. Ino had come down with the chicken pox and wasn't allowed out, so Crow was forced to give a private training session to both Hinata and Naruto. His hands were forming minute seals that no normal human would be able to notice. The seals truly served no purpose other than to coax Naruto and Hinata to attack by making them think he would attempt a jutsu. Hinata, you go in from the left. I don't think we should allow Crow to perform whatever jutsu those hand seals are for. Naruto stated and Hinata nodded and went off to the left of Crow as Naruto looked ahead from the bushes to watch their teacher. Hinata got into her position as Crow continued to sit unblinking or even seeing his breathing slow and even. Hinata ran forward, her Byakugan active, and Naruto went from the front. The two were silent as the wind never even breaking a twig or crunching a leaf beneath their feet as they struck. Crow continued to sit motionless until the last second that Naruto and Hinata were to attack. Crow moved almost flawlessly, catching the two by the wrists, eyes still closed. Never attack an opponent from the front or anywhere he can find you easily, Naruto. Hinata, Crow said softly, then spun the two onto their backs and jumped into the trees. Damn it, how did he know? Naruto cursed then questioned in a growl. Hinata couldn't really figure it out either and both looked around themselves trying to find their elusive and cunning teacher. Where is he? Naruto questioned aloud, looking around, and Hinata seemed confused as even with her Byakugan she wasn't able to find him. The problem with the Byakugan, Hinata, came Crow's voice, and both Naruto and Hinata's eyes widened. Crow stood behind and between the two, a sword at each of their throats. Is that no matter how powerful? It's still just sight, still just a pair of eyes. Crow said, and both the children were frozen to the spot. One wrong move, or even one twitch, and Crow could end their lives with a single move. And no matter how good they are, our eyes can always be fooled. Crow intoned darkly, his left eye staring at Hinata slightly before he turned his eyes to Naruto. Crow then moved quickly and moved his blades away from the two children's throats before elbowing both of them in the back and forward. The two turned quickly ready to fight, but Crow was gone. How does he do that? Naruto wondered aloud, looking around with wide eyes, Hinata doing much the same. Why can't we see him? It's almost like he's the wind or something. Naruto muttered to himself and a chuckle came from the forest. Very good, Naruto. To be like the wind is what a ninja must truly be. Silently and deadly, everywhere and nowhere, without form or face. The epitome of true ninja skill is to be in and out without anyone knowing you were there before it is too late. Crow said and then chuckled lightly. But to do this one needs more than their eyes to fight or to escape. You must hear your enemy, smell them, and feel their presence without them finding you. Crow said and kicked Naruto from behind before vanishing once more. Naruto quickly stumbled back to his feet, looking around with wide eyes. Was Crow really this good? If so, then Naruto was certain he could, at the very least, be a chunin with these skills. Naruto. I can't find him, Hinata said worriedly, and Naruto looked around equally worried. Don't worry, Hinata, he can't hide forever, Naruto stated and then tried to think of a way to find Crow. He sighed and took a breath, quickly trying to calm down his erratic breathing so he could find Crow. He then closed his eyes and listened to the world around him. He heard the running water of a nearby stream, the slithering motions of a large snake to the north, Hinata's heartbeat and erratic breathing. And then he heard something that sounded like the wind and his eyes snapped open as he leaned back and grabbed Crow around the waist. Excellent work, Naruto, Crow said simply, and Naruto released Crow and stood before him, the older teen chuckling lightly. You did well in figuring out what you had to do, Naruto. Assist Hinata with this and then we can all go back home. I don't think drawing out today's lesson is worth it without Ino here to catch the lesson also. Crow said simply before stretching and yawning loudly, before walking off his hands behind his head. Sometimes I wonder about him and his mental health, Naruto. Hinata said dryly, and Naruto chuckled then sighed as he had to admit. Hinata may have a point. Flashback no jutsu. Kai. To say Ino was surprised would be a fierce understatement. The fact that Crow had beaten them wasn't all that surprising, but the fact he had found a blind spot in the Hyuga's prided Byakugan was. If word got out about a blind spot in the Byakugan, it would be really bad for Konoha. Ino quickly shook her head and looked to her two friends worriedly. Well, what do we do, Naruto? If he's using the same tactic as back then, do you think we can really catch him? Ino questioned, and Naruto closed his eyes and started to mumble to himself so softly Ino and Hinata wondered if he himself could hear it. Soon Naruto snapped his eyes open and grinned to himself. We can if we learn what the blind spot in the Byakugan is. He stated, and Ino and Hinata blinked. Crow said that it's not strength that beats a ninja, it's knowledge. If we know what he knows about the Byakugan, then we can anticipate where he'll come from to attack us. Naruto stated, and Ino and Hinata thought about it and nodded. Alright Hinata, you're going to go attack Crow while I send 2 shadow clones with you. One disguised as Ino so he won't realize what we're doing. Naruto explained, and Hinata nodded her head. She then put her hands together and closed her eyes, soon opening with them bulging slightly as her Kekkei Genkai awakened. Naruto then did the T-shaped hand seal and silently produced 2 clones. One of the clones then turned into Ino, and they all nodded as the 2 clones and Hinata lunged down from the trees towards Crow. The older boy heard the 3 footsteps coming from 3 sides and inwardly sighed. It was going to be a repeat of the last time if they did that. As soon as Hinata and the clones were within striking range, Crow vanished before their eyes. However, to Ino and Naruto it was a different story, as their jaws promptly dropped. The reason they hadn't seen Crow before wasn't because of a jutsu, at least not one that made him invisible. No, what had happened was he was somehow able to stay afloat in the air. Crow was currently jumping around above Hinata, seemingly stepping on nothing, while too high to be seen from Hinata's point thanks to the brightness of the sun in the sky. That was how Crow had done it. He found the Byakugan's one blind spot. The area in front of the sun. While in the air and at an angle near the sun, Crow would be practically invisible due to the fact that the brightness of the sun would blind even the Byakugan if looked at directly. However, why Crow would jump around while in the air was another story, and as Naruto focused not on Crow but his feet, he saw that reason. Every time Crow was in the air, he would crouch and seemingly jump off of nothing, remaining silent that way so Hinata nor the clones would be able to spot him. But if you were to look closely, you could see some form of silver stand under him, like some sort of chakra step, so he could remain in the air or even jump multiple times. Ingenious. Naruto muttered to himself, amazed, then watched as Crow narrowed his eyes and let himself fall down in between the clones and Hinata. Naruto and Ino both nodded and then kicked off and lunged for Crow. The said boy was just then attacking when he noticed that Hinata ducked and the Ino and Naruto that had been there went up in a puff of smoke. Kage Bunshin. How the hell did I forget about them? Nice work there, Oto. I'll have to remember to teach you a few more of my jutsu tonight. Crow thought to himself and quickly jumped above Hinata as she swept out at Crow's legs. The masked boy then had to lean back as Naruto tried to punch him and felt a pair of feet grab his head. Shit, Ino's damn fling me with her feet thing. Crow mentally yelled as Ino had her hands on the ground and her feet were on the sides of Crow's head, holding him tightly as she then threw the older teen behind her and into a tree. Yes, we got him, Ino said as she landed on her feet, and Naruto grinned. Crow, however, wasn't so happy and grunted as he picked himself up and then pushed his goggles up away from his eyes to rest in front of his Heben Gakure forehead protector. Naruto briefly shivered as he saw his brother's eyes. I once heard that looking into Orochimaru's snake-like eyes could cause a man to see his death. I wonder if it's the same with Crow? Naruto wondered to himself while Crow's eyes narrowed on him and the 2 girls. Alright, no more Mr. Nice Crow. Crow said with a low tone and closed his eyes. Blood cross eye, Laval 1 analysis. Crow stated, opening his eyes as his Kekkei Genkai activated, and he analyzed his odds against the 3 young graduates and smirked. Let's do this then. And with that, Crow crouched and ran forward with great speed. The graduates quickly assumed defensive stances and Crow passed them to launch himself from a tree behind them and threw a punch at Naruto, who blocked, then tried to kick the older team. Crow blocked the kick and then placed a foot on the ground as Hinata tried to use her Byakugan on him and flipped above Naruto, Hinata hitting the blonde by accident. Ino then ran at him while he was still in the air and tried to use a flying kick. But Crow used his chakra step and jumped higher into the air. Crow spread his arms wide to make some wind resistance as he floated above the three young graduates and then reached into his bag and tossed an orb to the ground. The orb hit the ground and exploded into a vast sea of black smoke, cutting off any chance of the three graduates seeing him as he made his attack. Crow then pulled his arms and legs close to his body and shot into the smoke, landing on his hands and feet like a cat. He quickly formed a few hand seals and smirked behind his mask. Kai. Bloody Claw Jutsu. Crow called out and Naruto inwardly cursed and tried to stay calm to hear where Crow was going to come from. The reason for Naruto's anxiety was pretty much that the jutsu Crow was using was a part of his Bloody Claw taijutsu. Basically, it opened the first of what were called the 8 celestial gates, and made whoever was using it 5 times stronger and faster. Normally this would leave a person exhausted, but due to the fact that Crow always had a constant lockup on most of his true strength, he was somehow able to regulate it to where he wouldn't become completely exhausted and would instead only lose half of his chakra supply. At the moment, only one other person could use this style of taijutsu, Ino. Crow had decided to teach it to her as she was more frontal and brutal than Hinata, who had the Iron Claw Jutsu, a purely defensive variation of the Bloody Claw and more commonly known due to Crow having taught it to a few other people visiting from outside the village and wanting to be able to defend themselves. The theory behind the Steel Claw Taijutsu style was to have a chakra shell encase your body to block out most of the physical force of any blow that hit the body. The style also seemed to block some low-level chakra-based attacks, so the Hyuga's gentle fist-style taijutsu was less effective than normal. However, this was bad, as with this jutsu on Crow was nearly faster than light and could easily keep up with any Junin class ninja at the least. And as Naruto listened for his brother, he hoped he could feel him out and save whoever was his intended target. And luck was on his side, as he felt Crow then felt his target was Hinata again, and not because she was weak, rather because she was the most trouble with her Byakugan able to spot him. Naruto then lunged at Hinata and knocked her down, and Crow went over them and slid to a stop, his claws longer and his body glowing with silver chakra. Hinata, find Ino and get out from the smoke, I'll stay and take care of Crow. Naruto stated quietly as Crow lunged back into the fog at super speeds. Hinata nodded quickly and went to find Ino as Crow came at him with a haymaker, and the young ninja barely had the time to jump above the attack as Crow then spun and slid to a stop behind him before lunging at Naruto once more. Naruto ducked and performed a few hand seals, several clones appearing, and Crow cut through them with his claws like a hot knife through butter. Naruto flipped backwards, escaping from Crow's claws, and then growled lowly and performed a few more hand seals. Ninja Art. Chakra Shrapnel Jutsu. Naruto shouted and cracks formed all over his body before the chakra shell exploded and sent a hail of sharp chakra blades everywhere. Crow cursed loudly and flipped, ducked, and dodged all of the blades as he could before watching as Naruto then appeared above him, a chakra shell still around him to protect from the blast of the one that he detonated, and Crow inwardly grinned. Now then, let's end this. Kaiten, Chakra Field Jutsu. Naruto shouted and Crow blinked, then noticed that the chakra around him was in a condensed fog for a few seconds before igniting, and he covered his face and was sent flying out of the field of smoke and into the air. Naruto then came out of the smoke and ran up a tree as Ino and Hinata watched with apt anticipation to see if Naruto was finally going to beat Crow. However, it was not to be. Ninja Art, Flash Step. Crow shouted and the silver chakra around him moved to the ground and pulled him with it in a silver flash, and Naruto's eyes bolted open. Now then, Crow said as he looked at Naruto, who cursed and flipped off the tree to land next to Ino and Hinata. Crow quickly performed several hand seals and held his left wrist with his right hand, plunging it into the ground as he did. Goten, Chakra Blade Jutsu. Crow shouted and pulled a sword made of solid rock out of the ground. Naruto groaned and he, Ino, and Hinata all did their own hand seals for their own jutsu as Crow ran at them with the heavy-looking sword of rock. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto shouted as several clones appeared around him from plumes of smoke. Ninja art, steel shell jutsu. Hinata said as a chakra shell encased her body while she put her hands in an X across her chest. As she did, she gained a metal sheen to her skin and the rest of her body seemed to dull slightly. Kaimon Kai, bloody claw jutsu. Ino shouted, and while not as skilled as Crow, she knew she could at least get in a few good hits on their private teacher. As Crow came running, he smirked behind his mask and chuckled inwardly. These three are something else. Those three old Sannin better watch out or their positions might be challenged. Crow thought to himself as he roared and lunged at the kids who prepared for the assault. Konoha, Crow's training grounds, deep within the forest of death. The three rookies, plus Crow, were all laying back and resting for a few minutes before they would have to go meet their teams. Say Crow, I thought you couldn't Shunshin. But we all saw you teleport or something similar to it. How'd you do it? Naruto questioned, and Crow chuckled lightly to himself. It wasn't a Shunshin Naruto, nor was it teleportation Naruto. It's something I like to call ninja art. Shunpo, flash step. Crow stated, then sat up and stretched his aching arms. In essence, Naruto, the only reason I can't use Shunshin is because my chakra can't naturally be forced out of my body any farther than an inch because of a special chakra deficiency I have. Crow stated, and Naruto, Hinata, and Ino all nodded, as all knew about that already. So, I figured that if I found a way to use this to my advantage, I might be able to move at much quicker speeds and not need the Shunshin to get around the village quickly. He stated, then chuckled. Truthfully, it's a double-edged sword. When you use it, it expends phenomenal amounts of chakra to maintain it for more than a few seconds, thus people can sense you easily. However, it is useful for evading enemy techniques or a quick escape. Crow explained, and Naruto looked over at Crow and glared. I get that, what I want to know is how you do that. That weird aerial chakra step thing, and how the hell did you make a blade of rock? Naruto questioned, and Crow chuckled once more as Hinata and Ino both listened also. Okay. Simply put, Naruto, to use the Shunpo flash step, I had to alter my own jutsu, the chakra shell jutsu, ever so slightly to where, when I move my chakra at a certain angle in my body and to keep it in constant contact with me yet outside that 1-inch limit of my body, it has to flow quickly in that direction to keep up. This in turn makes the flash part of the flash step, because when light hits the chakra being emitted from my body, at that point it will create a flash where I had been. And then while in use it could be confused with something like a low-level version of the Hiraishin no Jutsu. Unfortunately, this takes a high-level amount of chakra control, which most genin usually wouldn't have. Crow explained, and Naruto nodded his head slowly while Ino and Hinata seemed lost, as Crow was much smarter than he would appear from his lechery. Okay, I got nothing. Also, where's the step in the flash step if the flash is caused by chakra reflecting light? Ino said, then questioned of Crow, looking at him as Hinata nodded in agreement, causing the older boy to sigh in slight annoyance from the two girls. Each was brilliant in their own field. For Ino it was taijutsu and herbology. For Hinata she was most like him, using chakra enhancing, supplementary, jutsus and had amazing chakra control. However, neither of them were very good at the basic theories behind chakra or anything else dealing with the mechanics of jutsu. That was all him and Naruto really. In layman's terms, girls, I basically force my chakra to one place, and my body speeds up in order to catch it. Also, the step part of my flash step move is because no matter what, in order to move anywhere even with the chakra at the right angle, you'll have to move yourself in the direction you're going with a single step. Crow stated, and Ino made an O with her mouth, now getting the basic concept of the Shunpo flash step, but soon frowned. But there was nothing for you to move yourself from in the air? Hinata observed, and Crow nodded his head as he now had all three sets of eyes on him. He sighed and moved his neck around to relieve some of the tension there before he then started his next explanation. That is correct, Hinata, and that is because of the next jutsu that Naruto asked about. The next jutsu I used to stay in the air and kick off of to use the flash step is like using multiple air flips, or as I like to call it, my air hike. Crow said, and the three genin listened to his every word. Mostly because what ninja wouldn't want to be able to do multiple jumps into the air. This jutsu takes the applications of making a leaf hover over your hand, tree climbing and water walking, and adds in a bit of the chakra shell jutsu, for good measure. Basically you create a platform of pure condensed chakra in the air with no element, and it can actually use wind resistance to allow you to move off of it with a jump, thereby allowing someone to stay in the air indefinitely if they can manage the amount of chakra in it correctly for that long. Crow explained simply, and Naruto raised a brow as he thought about what his brother had just explained. But how does the thing stay in one place? Wind resistance alone wouldn't allow you to jump off the platform if it's in mid-air, not to mention not attached to anything. Naruto stated knowingly, and Crow nodded his head with his arms under his head. Absolutely correct, Naruto. The air hike is a special platform, as the chakra applied to the platform is constantly moving to the currents of the wind beneath your feet, allowing the air to become temporarily semi-solid long enough for a single jump. Continued use can allow you to jump very high in the air, or can allow you to stay out of your opponent's field of vision like I did with Hinata. However, this jutsu can also be used as a chakra control exercise, as like water walking you have to adjust the chakra flow. However, you have to do so to match the movements of the air currents there, by making this probably the most difficult chakra control exercise I know of. Crow explained thoughtfully, and Naruto slowly nodded his head in understanding. Ino and Hinata both nodded after a little more thought, and then Hinata looked to Crow with a question in mind. Crow-sensei, what about the blade of rock you used against us at the end of the sparring session? I thought using elemental chakra was hard for you? Hinata questioned, and Crow chuckled lightly to himself. These kids had a lot of potential, but they just didn't have the drive to actually push their thoughts beyond normal or already pre-created jutsus. Well, Hinata, that's only half true. Yes, it is hard for me to use elemental chakra, but only in an attack like Kaden, Great Fireball Jutsu, Suiden, Sukoden no Jutsu, Fuuden, Dai Kamaitachi, Raiden, Raikyu, Doden, Doryuden, or Hyuden, Haryu Moko. Anything that doesn't require me to expel chakra far away from my body is something I am very good at. So no, I can't use genjutsu or long-range ninjutsu, as you all should already know. Crow explained, and they all rolled their eyes. However, I can channel chakra throughout anything I am holding, thus I created the chakra blade no jutsu. Basically it's elemental chakra I hold and can be focused into a blade. However, it works the best with ice, earth and wind if you want the weapon to be stable or able to cut through anything. Water's to fluid, so it doesn't work too well. Fire's to hot and causes massive problems when trying to wield it without taking precautions with the heat of the flames. And lightning is just too volatile to try and control in a single blade for too long. Crow explained, and Naruto nodded his head, then had an ear-to-ear grin come to his face. Hey Crow-kun, could you teach us those jutsu? Ino asked sweetly, and Crow med, and then thought for a few minutes. Just as he was going to answer, however, the alarm went off and the three genin hopefuls jumped up and nearly out of Thare's skin. After all, fighting against Crow to survive was taxing, and they'd forgotten about the time limit. Sorry guys, looks like I'll have to teach you those 3 jutsu at another day. Until then, have fun with your new teammates. Crow said, then used a flash step to vanish in a silver flash of pure chakra. Naruto and the 3 other genin hopefuls rolled their eyes and got up. The group then all quickly ran out of the forest and towards the school. However, a certain snake mistress just happened to have watched the little show and subsequent teaching session that the supposedly weakest genin in the village had put on, and couldn't help but smirk. Maybe there was hope for this next generation after all, especially if that was only the tip of the iceberg of what they could really do. Konoha Ninja Academy. Alright everyone, I'll start assigning your new Junin senseis now, Iruka said as he looked at the 27 genin before him. Naruto and the rest basically tuned out Iruka, waiting for him to announce who their friend's Junin sensei was going to be. Team 6, your Junin sensei will be. Before Iruka could finish, however, a kunai came from the window and a large black banner that said, "Here comes Team 6 Junin sensei. The lovely and single, Anko Mitarashi," on it in bright red bold lettering. She's too early as usually. Iruka thought to himself as he slapped himself in the face with his clipboard, pure annoyance visible on his face. As he did, a woman appeared in the middle of the room, and Naruto was sure he'd seen Crow following this one with a notebook once. Of course he only started doing that after meeting some guy at the hot springs named Jiraiya, who he said was the greatest man ever to live. She was pale, with dark purple hair pulled back into a spiky ponytail like Shikamaru's, only with her bangs covering her hite 8. A pair of pupilless brown eyes, a suit of custom-made metallic mesh to cover herself, an orange skirt that had straps to hold it on around her waist, a strange pendant around her neck, a long tan jacket, and black shinobi sandals with a pair of silver shin guards. Alright then maggots. I'm Anko Mitarashi and I'll be Team 6 Junin Sensei. The girl shouted before pumping her fist, and Sakura groaned, thinking it was the equivalent of a female Naruto. Naruto however blinked and had to stifle laughter as he heard her yell so much and saw what was on the banner. Holy shit, she's a female version of my old, Dobi, personality. Naruto inwardly laughed at this while Iruka meanwhile moved the banner slightly and looked at the woman slightly annoyed. You're too early Anko, he said simply, and Anko's face fell and her head slightly tilted as several members of the class started to snicker and Arisa started to bang her head on the table as she saw her new sensei. I haven't even announced you yet, Iruka stated, slightly annoyed with the woman, who chuckled nervously. Now then, Team 7's Junin Sensei is Kakashi Hitaki, Team 8 has Kurenai Yuhi, Team 9 is carrying on from last year, and Team 10 has Asumaseru Tobi as their sensei. They will all be here shortly, so please remain seated until then, Iruka announced and then glared at Anko. Of course Team 6 can leave now. Iruka growled and Anko chuckled nervously, then looked around the room for her newest batch of snake food. Alright then, Team 6 front and center, Anko shouted, and Kasara, Kairi, and Arisa all filed up before her and Anko blinked seeing them. Holy shit, an all-girl team, she shouted while pointing at them, causing Iruka to slap himself with his notepad, eye twitching slightly. Now Naruto he could stand, but Anko was in a whole other league compared to him when it came to annoying someone. Yeah, what of it, you oversized, female version of Naruto? Arisa asked with an annoyed frown, and Anko glared at her, to which Arisa just glared right back at her, not backing down from the older kunoichi. Anko then grinned widely as she then started to crack her knuckles menacingly while she looked at the three before her with an evil-looking grin slowly coming to her face. Oh, I'm gonna enjoy this. You three are going to cry and wish you were never born before I'm done with you, Anko said, then chuckled darkly, and Kasara and Kairi glared at their teammate, who shrugged and crossed her arms. Alright, move out, Anko shouted and then grabbed Arisa by her coat and started to drag her away. Arisa started to scream indignities and curses towards the Junin while her friends just laughed, following her and their new sensei out of the room. The rest of the team's Junin senseis soon came after that. Hinata got a girl Naruto knew Crow had followed with a notebook once. Maybe more times, but he didn't know for sure. She had long black hair that was held partially out of her face by her forehead protector. A pair of strange yet alluring red eyes, a figure that any pervert would kill to stare at. And she wore a mesh shirt with red and white wrappings over it made into a dress. A single red sleeve down her right side, wrappings around her lower arms and thighs, and a pair of blue shinobi sandals that left the heel open. Naruto admitted that while Crow may have been the second biggest pervert Konoha had ever seen, but he also had excellent tastes in women. Also, if I ever meet this Jiraiya guy, I'm going to punch his lights out for making Crow more perverted. Then torture him to find out why Crow would say he was the greatest man ever to live. Naruto silently vowed to himself, watching as Hinata left with her sensei, Kurenai. Soon the next Ino Shika Chao trio left with their sensei Asumaseru Tobi. It was 2 hours later, when all the other teams had left, that Naruto became angry. This guy's got some nerve. How can he be a Junin and show up 2 hours late to get his own team? Naruto inwardly demanded and growled outwardly, standing up and walking towards the door. He then opened the door and looked around outside before grinning. Naruto, you idiot, what do you think you're doing? Sakura demanded of her blonde teammate, and Naruto smirked as he crossed his arms. Nothing, he said innocently, then grabbed an eraser and a stool, then climbed up a stool to put it over the door so it would fall on their sensei when he entered. Just teaching this guy a lesson about making us wait for him, Naruto shouted with a grin, and his true personality snickered darkly with him. Hehehe. The jerk deserves this for being so late anyways. Even if he's Kasara-chan's father, that doesn't give him the right to be late. Naruto thought to himself as he carried his stool back over to his seat and sat down. Naruto, this is stupid. Sakura said while shaking her head, however a certain inner voice was singing a completely different tune. Cha, I live for this stuff. Sasuke merely rolled his eyes at what he thought was a pitiful attempt at a trap. There's no way a superior ninja could be fooled by such a simple trap, Naruto. Sasuke stated, looking over his laced fingers to the blonde who was rolling his eyes and leaned back with an evil smirk on his face. Hey, that might be true, Sasuke. However, a superior ninja is always looking for tripwires and other such ingenious traps. Something as simple as this will get them every time. Naruto thought to himself, wondering why no one ever seemed to notice this. Just as that thought passed by, he felt a presence and watched as a silver-haired man entered, only for the eraser to fall on his head. Ha-Gotya-1I. Naruto called out, laughing at the man. He was taller than any of the genins, with gravity-defying spiky silver hair, pale skin, and only his right black eye visible as his Hitai-8 covers his left eye. He wore a face mask like his daughter and the typical Junin outfit with a green flak jacket and hand protectors. Yep, that's Kasara-chan's father alright. Naruto thought to himself with a grin as he saw the man. I'm sorry, sensei. I tried to stop Naruto. Sakura apologized while bowing, but once more her inner self was singing a completely different tune. Ha, set him up and knock him down. That was great. The inner personality ranted to itself, and Sakura felt an eye twitch as she heard her inner self. Sasuke's sweat dropped as he saw their one-eyed sensei rub his head, and then thought to himself. This guy is supposed to be our elite shinobi instructor. He looks like he's completely worthless. Meanwhile, Kakashi looked over the students but hovered on Naruto for a bit. Isn't that Kasara's friend? Reminds me a bit too much of Obito and Sensei. Maybe I could give him a pointer or two. At least I might if he passes my test, that is. Kakashi thought to himself and looked at Sasuke. The last Uchiha and Obito's cousin, might be a great ninja someday. But I'll have to get to know them all a little more before I'm sure. He then looked at Sakura and mental flashbacks came to mind. A fangirl, no doubt, from the way she looks, more interested in makeup and boys than being a real shinobi. Reminds me of Rin in a way, though she was less so than this girl. Of course that's cause she was an Inuzuka. He thought, then looked at them all. Based off of my first impression of all of you all is. Kakashi left a pause and inwardly snickered. I hate you. He states simply, and the three genin hopefuls nearly fall over in shock save Sasuke, who rolls his eyes. Duckhead's probably thinking along the same line as me. Kakashi thought to himself, then I smiled. Meet me up on the roof. And with that he sunshined away into the roof. Well, he seemed nice. Naruto muttered while blinking his eyes rapidly. Oh well, I got nothing better to do. Naruto said and jumped up, walking out the door with his hands behind his head as Sasuke growled and then quickly walked past him and towards the roof with a frown, making Naruto roll his eyes. Man, Sasuke, had to be first in everything or what? Naruto wondered, annoyed, as they reached the roof to see their new sensei leaning back on the rail with an orange book in hand, causing Naruto to point. It's the damn book Crow always reads. He shouted angrily, and Kakashi blinked. That psycho Crow reads Icha Icha Paradise. He's not so bad after all. Kakashi thought to himself while Naruto's eye twitched in annoyance. Are all my senseis going to be pervs or what? Naruto inwardly demanded as Kakashi watched as his other two genin sat down looking at Naruto, who was muttering about perverts, strangely. Kakashi sighed sadly as he was forced to now put his precious smut away and actually learn something about his new team. Naruto was sitting next to Sasuke on the right to Kakashi, while Sakura was on the left, and all three seemed a little anxious. Alright, now I'd like to get to know each of you a little better and tell us about yourself. Kakashi said, and Sakura blinked. Like what, sensei? She questioned, and Kakashi thought to himself about it. Oh, you know, what you like, dislike, your hobbies, dreams, things like that. Kakashi said, and Sakura blinked. Why don't you go first, sensei? After all, you are like a complete stranger to us. Sakura offered, and Kakashi shrugged. Okay, he said, then took a thoughtful look. My name is Kakashi Hitaki, father of Kasara Hitaki, to those of you who didn't know. I don't feel like talking about my likes and dislikes. My dreams are none of your business. And I have many hobbies. Kakashi said, and Sakura grumbled about only getting his name while Naruto snickered when Kakashi finished. Alright Blondie, now it's your turn. Kakashi said while looking at Naruto, who blinked and then grinned widely. Alright, my name's Naruto Uzumaki. I like ramen and my big brother Crow. I dislike morons who take others for granted and people who treat others like they're nothing but weapons. My hobbies are eating ramen and learning ninja stuff from my big brother Crow. My dream is to someday earn the respect of those around me and fulfill my father's last wish. Naruto said happily, but Kakashi could hear some hint of sadness and anger in his voice. Well now, it seems Crow's more of a positive influence on him than I would have ever thought. But what does he mean fulfill his father's last wish? I thought no one knew who his father was. Let alone him. Kakashi thought to himself while looking at Naruto for a few seconds, then eyes smiling. Alright, Pinky, your turn. Kakashi said to Sakura, who blinked and frowned but soon let it go while smiling. Once again her inner self was singing a different tune though. Cha, who does he think he is calling me Pinky? I am Sakura Haruno, I like well. It's not really a thing, but a boy. Sakura said, then looked to Sasuke and giggled. I dislike Naruto. My hobbies are. She looked at Sasuke one more and Kakashi felt his eye twitch in annoyance. And my dreams are. She looked at Sasuke once more and squealed, causing Kakashi to inwardly groan. Great. A fangirl, alright. Just what I didn't need. Kakashi thought, inwardly groaning, then turned to the final member of his new team. Alright Duckhead, you're next. Kakashi said to Sasuke, and the brooding Uchiha frowned and glared at him before he spoke. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I like few things. I dislike many things, my hobbies are my own, and my dream is to revive my clan and… No, that's my ambition, to kill a certain man. Sasuke stated, and everyone had different thoughts on this. Sasuke is so cool. Cha, he's smoking hot, that's for sure. Sakura and inner Sakura thought as they smiled widely at Sasuke. Jesse, he really has issues. I mean, come on. Even Crow's not this bad about getting vengeance on the guys who attack me. Then again, when it comes to being a perv, he is this obsessed. Naruto thought to himself and then snickered as he thought of the few hundred times he'd seen Ino punch Crow for his lechery. I got a fangirl and an avenger. The only one who seems like he'll be halfway decent is Naruto, and from the sound of it Crow taught him some things, so I won't have to focus on the basics with him, hopefully. That leaves most of Pinky and Duckhead's training up to me, unfortunately. Kakashi thought to himself, a hand on his cheek as he looked over his team, then eyes smiled. Alright, I believe we all know each other well enough. Formal training begins tomorrow. Kakashi said, and Naruto pumped his fist. Yes sir, what will our duties be? Naruto asked excitedly, and Kakashi sighed, feeling maybe Naruto had training, but if this was how he acted, then his personality, not to mention his choice of clothing, would possibly be more a danger than an asset. Our first project shall include only the members of this team, Kakashi said to the three, and Naruto inwardly frowned. What is it then, sensei? Sakura asked of their Junin sensei. Survival exercises. Kakashi said fatly, and Naruto narrowed his eyes on his sensei with a frown on his face. So, he's going this route again. From what Kasara has told me, her dad always uses survival exercises as a way to fail his teams. This is because of the fact that no one has reached his standards. Crow informed me that the old, survival exercises, is actually a test of teamwork. He said that in Kiri they used the same thing only before the Genin test, and it was so that two possible Genins would become closer, and thus when the final exam came it would be all that much harder to kill them. Naruto thought to himself as he watched his teammates question their instructor. But, Kakashi-sensei, we had survival training all throughout our time at the Ninja Academy. Sakura stated, and Naruto frowned as he heard her complain. Nay, but Sakura, Crow-ni-san takes me out on harder survival exercises than anything that the academy did. Naruto states, and Sakura glares at the blonde. Please Naruto, your brother may be one of the coolest guys in Konoha, but he's still only a civilian. And I think Iruka-sensei and Mizuki-sensei know a lot more about training and survival than he would. Sakura said, and Naruto growled angrily, glaring at the pink-haired girl. Don't talk about my ni-san like that, Sakura. He does so know what he's doing when he teaches me. Naruto growled angrily with a wild look in his eyes as the pink-haired girl backed off slightly, and Sasuke frowned slightly. Kakashi blinked. Naruto was the one who never got mad according to Anbu intelligence. However, it looked as though his brother was a bit of a sore spot with him. Curious. Now Sakura. Non-shinobis have to survive in the wilderness just like ninjas when they travel a lot like Naruto's brother used to. In any event, we'll be meeting at Training Ground 7 tomorrow so I can assess your skill level. Kakashi stated and Sakura nodded slowly as Naruto smiled and hid his anger, causing Kakashi to narrow his eye in thought. Naruto's definitely not always happy. He's hiding something behind these smiles, I can tell that much. But it's definitely not a 1,000-year-old demon. What, or maybe, who are you really Naruto Uzumaki? Kakashi thought to himself, then cleared his throat and reached into his vest to pull out some papers. Alright, these will detail your assignment, so don't be late tomorrow, but as a bit of advice, don't eat anything before you come. Kakashi said, and Sakura blinked. Why not, Kakashi-sensei? She questioned, and her Junin-sensei chuckled lightly. You'll throw up, he told her simply, then sunshined away and the three genins looked at one another before Sasuke got up. Throw up? How hard is this test going to really be? Sakura wondered before looking to her precious Sasuke as he then crumpled his own form up, and Naruto frowned while actually reading it, unlike Sasuke. Sakura however tried to read it but blinked, then let it fly away to follow Sasuke screaming his name. Naruto rolled his eyes once they were gone and put a hand to his chin in thought as he looked over the form now that he was alone. He took the time to catch Sakura's paper, then picked up Sasuke's and studied the paper for a bit. Seems like a standard test from the outside. However, the actual form itself is a bit too heavy, and is giving off a faint chakra signature. That means that it is probably made of special chakra-encoded paper that is usually used for a secret message, meaning that Kakashi-sensei wanted us to actually read these before tomorrow. The message before that details that his survival training will be a 3-on-1 match against him, to bring anything you might think will be needed, what time to show up, and that we shouldn't eat unless we want to throw up. Naruto said to himself, then applied some chakra to the paper and the letters and sentences began to change. Naruto grinned as the real message was revealed and quickly read through it. From Kakashi Hitaki to whomever it may concern. If you are reading this, I applaud you in your deductive skills, a good quality for any shinobi out on the field. Now then, you may have noticed that the survival exercises are more than they might appear. As I am sure, I have told you not to eat or else you'll throw up. However, if you're reading this, then you definitely should eat. But only enough so you will have energy to fight. Also, I will show up 2 hours late, do the same unless you want to be waiting for a while. Next, seeing as I have marked these forms with a special seal below, I want you to place some blood on it. Then add some of your chakra to it, and take the scroll and the item from within to use against me tomorrow. If either or both of your teammates have thrown their forms away, collect them and do the same with those. Each form holds a different item and scroll, each with a special jutsu. One has ninjutsu, the next is a low-level genjutsu, and last is taijutsu. These jutsu shall aid you during the test should you take the time to learn them tonight, and sleep won't be necessary if you have the ninjutsu scroll. Do not give them any of the items or share them. These items are basically normal and wouldn't cost much, but they are essential if you want to pass the test tomorrow. Now then, next on the agenda, I want to say how impressed I am that you took the time to notice that this wasn't normal paper. You'll be needing those same observational skills in the morning, so stay sharp. Your Junin-sensei Kakashi Hitaki. Not bad, Kakashi-sensei. If the paper wasn't too heavy to be normal, I might not have noticed that. Naruto said to himself, then bit his thumb and spread his blood over the seal on his paper. He then placed some chakra into it and grinned as a small note and what looked like a bag of pills appeared next to a scroll. Alright, let's see what's first. Naruto thought to himself as he picked the note up and read it. Soldier pills, developed by the military for use on the main field. It doubles a person's chakra capacity and output, allowing for stronger jutsu uses and higher stamina. It allows a person to go non-stop for 3 days and night. However, prolonged use leads to paranoia and near total exhaustion. Naruto blinked and then grinned as he looked at the bag in hand and then opened it up. Only 4. Figures, he wouldn't want me to have too many after all. That would make it a bit too easy. Naruto said as he then put the bag inside his pocket along with the note. He then unraveled the scroll and read what jutsu it was. Maizei ga Cure no Jutsu? He said to himself and quickly read the description. An A-ranked jutsu that allows the user to become temporarily invisible to the enemy. However, prolonged use is not recommended as it tends to lead to chakra exhaustion quickly. Naruto read and nodded his head slowly. Basically the items in this scroll is to sneak up on the enemy, in this case Kakashi-sensei. Naruto said to himself, then looked between Sakura and Sasuke's forms and sighed, taking Sakura's first. He once more spread his blood and applied chakra to the seal and watched as an item and a scroll appeared. A simple box of matches? Naruto questioned with a raised brow and snickered evilly. Ah, I get it. Then this must be the genjutsu. Damn, I'm no good at genjutsu. Naruto shouted and started to rub his head in annoyance as he then put the matches in one of his pockets and looked at Sasuke's crumbled up form. Well, I guess this one is taijutsu. He said to himself, then once more unsealed the item and scroll. A pair of gauntlets? He questioned with a raised brow and looked them over with a critical eye. They weren't in the best condition. No, these were pretty old and looked slightly rusty. However, they did seem able to continue working and still had spikes on the knuckles, metal along it with leather around the underside where the forearms would be, and had a hidden knife on the sides that would fold outward for easily hiding them from enemies. Not bad. All things considered, Crow should be able to clean these up and get them back into workable order by tomorrow. Naruto thought to himself and extended the blades from the sides of the old gauntlets and cringed at the rusted and under-cared metal that looked duller than his Dobby personality's brain. Oh boy, Crow's also going to have to show me how to manage and maintain these. Naruto said to himself as he fingered the rusted metal carefully. Now then, what's the technique here, I wonder? Naruto wondered and opened the taijutsu scroll. Senengarashi? He questioned with a raised brow and looked over the attack description. Basically a mega-ass poke. However, when used with a kunai or other sharp object, it could do some serious damage. Naruto thought to himself, then grinned widely. Like the spiked knuckles on these old gauntlets. He said with triumph, and then got up with the gauntlets and scrolls in hand. He then jumped off the roof into the next one, running quickly home so he could master a few new jutsu for his first mission as a member of Team 7. The next day, Naruto walked towards the destination of their survival training with a huge grin on his face as he wore the now polished and shiny gauntlets, displaying the leaf symbols on the hands proudly. It had been one wild night last night, between Crow teaching him the camouflage concealment technique and 1,000 years of death. He didn't even have time to learn the genjutsu, and while Naruto was sleeping, then eating, Crow had finished fixing up the ancient gauntlets from Kakashi to look as good as new. Naruto! Sakura screeched as he arrived, then blinked. Sasuke was sitting down in front of a tree and Sakura was glaring at him from beside the Uchiha. How can you be 2 hours late? She demanded, glaring at him with Sasuke looking just as, if not more, annoyed. Naruto then grinned nervously as he rubbed the back of his neck slowly. Forgot what time we were supposed to come here. He stated, and Sakura growled before running forward to punch him. Naruto smirked as he then decided to allow her to hit him once. After all, she wasn't that strong anyways. With a resounding punch to the cheek, Naruto decided he'd have to rethink that last thought as his jaw was now throbbing. What the hell? Does she only seem strong when hitting me, or is it just that she likes hitting me that hard? Naruto wondered to himself, grimacing from the ground, and stared up to see Sakura still glaring at him with her hands on her hips. Naruto, you idiot! Kakashi-sensei said we had to be on time. Sakura shouted angrily, and Naruto rolled his eyes as he got back up, now nursing his now throbbing jaw. Naruto then looked to see Sasuke was eyeing his new gauntlets and inwardly smirked. What's with you, Sasuke? Never seen gauntlets before? Naruto questioned, and Sakura blinked, only just noticing the shiny metal of his new, used gauntlets. Yes, I have, Dobby. Just wondering where you got them. Sasuke stated, and Naruto took a thoughtful look inwardly, wondering why Sasuke was a ninja if he couldn't sense the amount of chakra in those forms. I found them, was all Naruto said, shrugging his shoulders, and Sasuke grunted and turned to see Kakashi walking up to them. Yo! He said with a raised hand, and Sakura pointed at him and yelled out. You're late. Naruto frowned at this and glared at their sensei. I get hit in the jaw, and he gets yelled at. Yeah, that's real fair. Naruto thought to himself, annoyed with the situation thus far. Kakashi blinked, making it seem as though he was listening when in actuality he was looking at them to determine if they figured out the notes. He saw the gauntlets on Naruto's arms and inwardly smirked. Alright, I've set this alarm to go off at noon. Kakashi said, taking a clock out of his vest and placing it on a nearby stump. Now then, your mission for today is to acquire these 2 small bells from me. Kakashi said, showing the three a pair of small silver bells. But, you have to get them from me before the timer goes off in 30 minutes. And, anyone who doesn't get a bell before then, doesn't get lunch and gets tied to the middle stump over there. Kakashi said, and the three genin all gawked at him with the same thought going through their heads. So that's why you wanted us to go without breakfast. All you need, is one bell apiece. Unfortunately one of you is bound for the stump. One is bound to be sent back to school in disgrace. The question is who? Kakashi said, then questioned, looking around, and the three all looked among themselves. You've gotta be shitting me. Naruto exclaimed, summing up the vast majority of the thoughts through the other genin's minds. I shit you not. Kakashi said humorously with an eye smile visible to them. Let's see if they can figure out my little test or not. Kakashi said while looking at the three genin before him. You may of course, use shuriken or any other weapon on hand. Attack as through you mean to kill me or you will surely fail. Kakashi said simply with a lazy look to his one visible eye. But, if we do that could seriously hurt you. Sakura exclaimed, and Kakashi shrugged his shoulders but paid special attention to the calculating look in Naruto's eyes. He was disguising it well, appearing to be staring off into space, but Kakashi wasn't a Junin and a former Anbu captain for nothing. Alright now, let's begin. Kakashi said as then Sasuke and Sakura swiftly ran to hide themselves, leaving Naruto there to stand before Kakashi. So deciding to take the more direct approach. Naruto? Kakashi questioned as Naruto then crouched and rushed forward. Kakashi then reached into his back pouch and Naruto blinked while running forward. I have to be ready in case he pulls out a kunai or shuriken. What the hell? Naruto exclaimed in his head and falling down as Kakashi pulled out his little orange book. Is something wrong? I thought you were coming for me. Kakashi said, and Naruto growled, flipping back to his feet and glaring at him, a small smudge of dirt on his chin. You're reading that smut at a time like this? Naruto exclaimed while glaring at Kakashi, who then looked to his book while telling him simply. Of course. I've been dying to find out how the story ends after all. He stated, and Naruto started to growl, his eye twitching rapidly. Now, many would ask why Naruto could act so calm when being attacked by Mizuki and not by Kakashi reading that smut. The answer is actually quite simple, he really doesn't like that little book. Mostly cause of the fact that his brother's always reading the damn thing in order to ignore him. So by seeing Kakashi do basically the same thing, it really set him off. I'm gonna flatten you, you pervert. Naruto shouted, rolling up the sleeves of his coat and running at Kakashi, throwing his fist at him. The Junin then lazily caught the fist with one hand and Naruto brought his leg up to slam him down. But the older nin simply ducked down, still reading his smut, as Naruto landed and then ran at him once more. I'm gonna shred that damn book to pieces. Naruto shouted and then touched a button on each of the gauntlets at the wrist. In a second the blades from the gauntlets extended with a SHNK sound. Kakashi's highly trained ears picked up the sound and he looked over only to see Naruto try and take his head off. Obviously Crow fixed those old gauntlets back into pristine condition. Might as well let Naruto keep them if they both went to all that trouble. Although I really need to teach him how to fight with them better. Kakashi mused as he then jumped up as Naruto spun with the blades. Kakashi then landed behind Naruto and inwardly grinned. A good shinobi never shows his back to the enemy. Naruto. Kakashi said with an eye smile, his hands making the seal of the tiger. Naruto, get out of THARE. You'll be killed. Sakura shouted and Naruto growled. Stupid. That girl really needs to learn not to give away her position like that. Naruto thought as he looked over his shoulder to see Kakashi's position and his eyes widened. Wait, that's not a fire technique. That's... Naruto inwardly smirked as then Kakashi lunged forward with a manic look in his one eye, not seeing Naruto make a hand seal also. Konohagakure number Sato's most secret and most sacred technique. Senin Garashi. Kakashi said, putting his fingers to Naruto's butt and sending him flying. However, as it flew into the air it turned into a plume of smoke and Kakashi's eyes widened. Shadow clone. And a replacement jutsu. He's using both at the same time, not bad for a dobi, if I do say so myself. Kakashi thought to himself. Hey Kakashi sensei, I think you missed me. Naruto shouted, appearing behind Kakashi, whose one eye widened as he noticed the ninjutsu. Maizei Gakure no Jutsu too. He must have gotten all but the genjutsu then. Incredible. He's mastered AD and A rank jutsu in only one night. Impressive Naruto. Kakashi thought to himself as then Naruto made the same hand seal as Kakashi. Now for a taste of your own medicine. Senin Garashi. Naruto shouted while pulling his fingers together and using the spikes on the knuckles of his conjoined hands to hit Kakashi in his blind spot, sending the older nin flying only to disappear in a plume of smoke. Meanwhile, Sakura and Sasuke were both watching, slightly amazed at what Naruto was doing. The Dobi actually made a plan. He used the art of misdirection rather than truly barreling in headfirst. He sent in a clone instead of himself and then attacked from behind. Sasuke thought to himself with a smirk, then narrowed his eyes. However, I want to know where he learned those techniques. Kakashi-sensei only just showed that stupid butt poke thing. But that invisibility jutsu could be useful in my quest. Sasuke thought, glaring at Naruto, who blinked then started to look around for Kakashi, who had managed to disappear from Naruto's vision. Ah shit, even with the Maizei Gakure no Jutsu that Kakashi-sensei left, I should have known he wouldn't be foolish enough to fall for it. Then even with that Senin Garashi thing, he predicted it and used a clone to fool me. This is bad. Kakashi has me on the ropes and can attack from any direction he wants now. Naruto thought to himself as then several shuriken came down near him and he brought his gauntlets up to block the attack. Not bad, Naruto. Kakashi said, sitting lazily in a tree still reading his book. The blonde Jinchuriki glared at his sensei from behind the steel of his gauntlets. But not quick enough. Kakashi stated, and Naruto frowned. By now you must have run out of steam after all. Kakashi stated and Naruto smirked. Maybe, but I know how to get it back. Naruto stated and pulled out the bag of soldier pills and found only 3 left, seeing as he ate one last night so he wouldn't need much sleep. Okay, I've only got 3 of these left and Kakashi-sensei is still at least 75% capacity. Even with these I can't show him my more powerful jutsu, or he and every other shinobi in the village will figure out I've been deceiving them. I need a way to fight him without running the risk of giving out my secret. But I'm only one person, I can't fight someone like Kakashi-sensei without my full skills. I mean, even when I'm fighting Crow I always had Ino and Hinata too. Oh of course, why didn't I think of that before? Naruto suddenly exclaimed in his head and smirked as he jumped back and into the trees, leaving Kakashi in the clearing. Did he figure it out already? Maybe he's not a dobi. Maybe he just wants everyone to underestimate him. Sneaky, cunning, underhanded, totally ninja. Kakashi thought with an inward smirk as Naruto looked around the trees for a short while, forgetting about Kakashi, and spotted Sakura on the ground and jumped to her. Sakura, we need to work together. I can't take on Kakashi-sensei on my own. I need you to figure out this genjutsu, and to eat one of these. Naruto said, pulling out the genjutsu scroll from his jacket and holding it and a soldier pill out to her. Wah, but we're supposed to be trying to get the bells. Sakura said, and Naruto grinned. If we can get something besides those bells from Kakashi, I'm sure we can have all 3 of us pass. Naruto said, and Sakura raised a brow, confused. Come on Sakura, he's had that book's practically glued to his face. We take that and we got him in the palm of our hands. Naruto told her, and Sakura blinked. Did Naruto just make a sensible plan? Alright, but what's the pill for? Sakura said, taking the 2 items, and had a questioning look on her face. It's called a soldier pill. It'll fill your reserves and let you forget your hunger for a period of time. Naruto said, and Sakura grinned and downed the pill quickly before her eyes lit up and she shivered. Whoa, you weren't kidding, she said somewhat loudly, and Naruto looked around and sighed when he didn't see Kakashi anywhere at the moment. Where the hell did Kakashi-sensei go? Naruto questioned, looking around and only seeing a log with several kunai lodged into it. A minute ago, Sasuke was watching Kakashi like a hawk for him to give even the slightest drop to his guard. Naruto managed to catch him slightly off guard with that freaky ass poke, but that wouldn't be effective enough to disable Kakashi. Sasuke mused and then saw Kakashi look over to the side when someone shouted something. Now, Sasuke inwardly roared and threw several kunai towards the Junin. I've got M. Sasuke thought to himself, but his eyes widened as the kunai hit Kakashi, only for him to turn into a log. What no? He used the Kawarimi no Jutsu again. And I just fell for it and gave away my position like an amateur. Sasuke inwardly chided himself, then jumped off, not seeing the single eye watching him from the shadows. Brash and impetuous. He's a little rough around the edges. But with a little work he and Naruto both could make excellent shinobi. Kakashi thought to himself as he then saw Naruto looking around while sitting with Sakura and raised a brow. Now what are they up to, I wonder? Kakashi asked himself as then Naruto vanished after using a couple of seals, and he smirked. So he did learn the Maizei Gakure no Jutsu, after all. Not bad, Naruto. Not bad at all. Kakashi thought to himself, then shunshined behind Sakura, who was reading a scroll. Sakura behind you, Kakashi said, and Sakura blinked before turning to see her sensei there. He quickly did several hand seals and inwardly smirked. Megan. Narukumi no Jutsu. Kakashi said quickly, and Sakura's eyes fogged over as she looked at his one eye. As she looked forward, she saw leaves start to surround her, spiraling into the air and blocking her view of Kakashi until they died down and he was gone from sight. What was that? Where'd Kakashi-sensei go? She questioned quickly, looking around the area. Sakura. The girl heard the voice and turned around smiling. Sasuke. She called out only to stop as she saw the boy she had a crush on. Saku. Help me, Sasuke said, multiple kunai and shuriken strewn throughout his body as Sakura looked on horrified until she remembered the last thing she heard Kakashi say. Wait a minute, that was the same name of the genjutsu that Naruto wanted me to learn from that scroll. And if it's the same illusion, I should be able to break it. I hope. Sakura thought, inwardly cheering for figuring it out, and formed a seal with her hands. Kai, she called out, and the illusion disappeared, causing her to sigh in relief. Naruto. I don't know if you knew what that jutsu was, but thanks. If I hadn't known there was a technique like that, I might have actually fell for it. Sakura thought to herself, then patted her stomach. Not to mention, if I was hungry I'd have never thought to notice. She thought, not seeing Kakashi above her, his book still out with a small smile behind his mask as he saw the girl get through his challenge. Naruto must have shared one of his soldier pills with her as well as the scroll for that genjutsu. Then that means he's also going to give one to Sasuke and have one left for himself, if I'm right about him eating one last night rather than sleep. Excellent work, Naruto. You're proving your former teacher Sans Iruka wrong. Naruto. Kakashi thought, then looked out in the clearing to see Sasuke standing with his arms crossed, looking direct at him from below. You'll make a fine shinobi, he thought to himself, and jumped down towards the young man. So, just you and me now, Kakashi said, and Sasuke glared at the older nin. I'm not going to beat him as easily as you did, Sakura, Sasuke said, and Kakashi smirked. He probably thinks I caught Sakura in an illusion just now from my statement. However, he's so hungry he doesn't realize that I mean he's the only one in the area. Naruto must not have found him in time. Too bad, Kakashi thought to himself, then crossed his arms slightly, still reading. Save you boasts until you've got a bell. Duck head, Kakashi said, causing Sasuke to glare at him heatedly. I'm going to show you the true strength of the Uchiha clan. The most elite family in all of Konohagakure no Sato, Sasuke said, and Kakashi finally put his book away and then told the dark-eyed boy with an eye smile. I look forward to it. No matter how annoying or anal, this kid's still an Uchiha. I can't leave my guard as open as I have up until now. I shouldn't have left it so low while fighting Naruto, but I needed to assess his level of skills. Kakashi thought, as then Sasuke threw several throwing knives at him and he flipped out of the way of them. One of which then cut a nearby somewhat concealed rope, and Kakashi's eye widened. A trap? He questioned quickly and dodged out of the way only for Sasuke to appear behind him. Sasuke then kicked at Kakashi, but the older nin caught the leg with his left arm, grabbing by the ankle with his right. Sasuke then tried to punch him, and Kakashi used his left hand to catch it, his eye still only half open as Sasuke then tried to kick him, and Kakashi moved him to an angle where he was almost upside down but managed to block the blow. Sasuke smirked as he then quickly reached for the bell at Kakashi's waist. Kakashi's eye bolted open as he had to release Sasuke and leap back, the tip of the young boy's finger grazing the bell slightly as Kakashi frowned. It's a good thing I put my book away. This kid's amazingly skilled. I wouldn't even be able to read it if I tried. Kakashi thought to himself as Sasuke slowly got up. I'll admit it, Sasuke. You're not like the others. Kakashi said and then blinked as Sasuke started to perform several hand seals ending in a horse and tiger. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Sasuke shouted and Kakashi inwardly cursed as a huge amount of fire came his way. As the fire soon cleared, Sasuke saw that Kakashi had somehow managed to escape and the young genin looked all around himself for the Junin. Where is he? Above. Behind me? Where'd he go? Sasuke wondered, then felt a pair of hands take hold of his legs by the ankles. Below. Kakashi called out as he then pulled Sasuke down to where only his head was left visible. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Kakashi said as he came out of the ground and looked at the now glaring boy. I'll admit you aren't like the others. Although, you still have a long way to go. The older nin said with an eye smile. But then heard something that sounded like yelling and rolled his eyes. Naruto must have found the food. He thought to himself, then disappeared, leaving Sasuke in a hole. Sasuke. Naruto whispered from beside him and the said boy blinked and looked around. Where are you, Dobi? I can't see you, he stated, and with a light chuckle Naruto appeared at his side. Where'd you learn that? He demanded quickly and Naruto rolled his eyes. I'll tell you later. Now do you want to beat Kakashi-sensei? Naruto questioned and the Uchiha nodded his head. Then we're going to have to work together, Naruto said and pulled Sasuke out of the ground. The Uchiha then patted the dirt off his shoulders and frowned. Why should I work with you, or the fangirl? He asked, and Naruto crossed his arms. Because I have a way to give you your strength back and lose your hunger problem, Naruto said flatly, and Sasuke growled, then mulled it over in his head. Hurry up, that damn timer could go off at any moment, Naruto stated, and Sasuke thought it over much quicker. On one hand, he could try and attack Kakashi now, but that would be bad as Kakashi obviously could take him when he's already weakened, and that last jutsu nearly killed what was left of his energy. On the other hand, Naruto was shown a bit more tact than normal and said he could give him back his energy and strength. Alright, I'll bite. What the hell's your plan? Sasuke questioned, and Naruto smirked. First eat this, then we find Sakura and the plan goes in order, Naruto said, handing a soldier pill to Sasuke, who popped it into his mouth and ate it. His eyes bolted open as he felt his strength return and his hunger die down. Cool, huh? I better have mine now just in case, Naruto said, eating his, and then cracked his neck with a smirk. Alright, seeing as you weren't just spouting out nonsense, I'll listen to this plan of yours, Sasuke said as Sakura came from behind a bush and grinned seeing him. However, you have to keep that away from me until we're done, Sasuke said, pointing to the pink-haired girl with a frown, and Sakura slumped. Right. Anyways, here's what I think. So Naruto wasn't here, Kakashi mused, seeing no signs of the blonde at the memorial stone where he'd left the lunchboxes. He made me come here with a clone probably, while he's had time to plot with Sakura and Sasuke by now. Clever Naruto. I might have to recommend you for Anbu if this keeps up, Kakashi thought to himself, then heard something from a nearby bush as Naruto jumped at him with the blades of his gauntlets out once more. Haven't you tried this once before? Kakashi questioned as he jumped back, evading Naruto's attack. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Came Sasuke's voice from behind him, and Kakashi's single eye opened wide. He quickly used a replacement jutsu and reappeared in a nearby tree, looking down to see that the Naruto down there disappear into a plume of smoke. He then got ready to attack Sasuke, only to yelp and grasp his arm as a blade cut him and drew blood. His eye widened once more as Naruto was beside him, some slight blood on his gauntlet's blade, and the older nin quickly jumped back away from the younger nin. At that point the alarm went off and he let out a sigh of relief. Time's up, he said, and the three genin jumped out in front of him with smirks. What's with all the smirks? None of you ever got any. Kakashi was cut off as he then saw that Sakura had the two bells and tossed one to Sasuke. The Junin blinked multiple times as he saw this and then looked to whistling innocently. Well, that still leaves Naruto, he said, and Naruto held up a certain orange book, causing Kakashi to reach into his back pocket, and his eyes went wide in horror as he couldn't feel his precious smut. Right. Well, as Kakashi tried to stay calm, Naruto pulled the pack of matches that had been with the Genjutsu scroll out of his coat pocket and waved it in front of Kakashi, who knew what that meant. This exercise is over. You all pass. That's all for today, Team 7. Your real duties shall begin tomorrow. Just please give me back my book. Kakashi said, looking pathetic, and Naruto took a thoughtful look. I don't know. What do you guys think? Naruto questioned of Sakura and Sasuke. I say burn it, Sakura stated with an evil grin on her face. Show him not to be perverted around me ever again. Inner Sakura shouted boldly, though no one heard her. Kakashi quickly shook his head no, eyes wide in horror at the thought of them burning his precious smut. Well, what do you think, Sasuke? Should we give him his book back? Naruto questioned, scratching his chin, and Sasuke med to himself with a smirk, arms crossed. Why not just burn it for the mega-ass poke he tried to use on you? Sasuke said, and Kakashi moved with god-like speed, reclaiming his precious book before they could even notice him and rubbing it to his cheek like it was the most precious thing to him in his life. The three genin looked at one another, and Sakura and Naruto burst out laughing while Sasuke simply smirked, seeing the grown man act in such a way. Kakashi blinked, seeing the three newly made genin, and I smiled at the only team to ever pass this test. They all have potential, even Sakura. She must have been hiding with the real Naruto while that clone came at me. So when I went to the nearest tree, all he had to do was distract me with one hand while he grabbed my book, and she got the bells for herself and Sasuke. Kakashi then smiled as he looked at the three genin, his first team to pass.